8:30 a.m. on August the 6th. Can't believe it's August already. And we are lucky today to have Marcella Jenkins to join us in a prayer. So please come forward.
Good morning, everyone. Will you bow your heads as I pray? In the scriptures you have said the citizens ought to obey the governing authorities, since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. Therefore, if I pray for our Mayor, Brenda Gunter, for the various levels of the city officials, and in particular for this assembled council, I'm asking that you would graciously grant them wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for peace and justice, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, personal peace in their lives and joy in their tasks. I pray for the agenda set before them today. Please give an assurance of what will please you and what will benefit those who live and work in around our beloved city of San Angelo. Father, we ask you to protect our city, and we pray for those that lost, families that lost loved ones in Waco and also in Dayton, Ohio. God, bring peace to these families in the name of Jesus. Father God, we pray for rain as well. We need the water for nutrition, and we need the water for our plants. We will constantly give you the praise, the glory, and the honor because you are our Father. I pray for the agenda before to them today. Please give assurance again, God, and we be mindful to praise you. It is your most blessed name I pray. Amen and amen.
May I also ask that we continue to bow our heads for 30 seconds in honor of all those who lost their lives in our fellow El Paso city in Texas. Thank you. We will now have Aubrey Groves come forward, and she's the daughter of Brian Groves, and she is going to enter second grade at Crockett Elementary this fall season. So she's going to lead us in prayers. You want to turn this way, and we're going to look at the flag right up here, okay? Put our hand over our heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
The republic for which it stands, one nation.
The Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Really good. Our proclamation today is a recognition of the City of San Angelo Budget Division for receiving the Government Finance Officers Association's, or GFOA, Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. So the Budget Office, please come forward. The City of San Angelo's Budget Division has again earned the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada. The GFOA said the award reflects the city's commitment to meet government budgeting's highest principles. Winners must satisfy recognized guidelines for effective budget presentations. The Budget Division has won the award for many years running. The Finance Department also annually earns GFOA honors for its comprehensive annual financial report and the State Comptroller's Leadership Circle Award for financial transparency. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby recognize and applaud the City of San Angelo's Budget Division for its achievement and continued recognition. Congratulations. Would someone like to speak today? Okay, let me get out of your way.
Good morning. Our budget staff works very hard to be transparent and share our information as a city with our community, and we really pride ourselves with that. And we most of all would like to thank our fellow coworkers, our directors, and our managers. Without you, none of this would be possible. And we look forward to continuing to serve our community.
We will now open up the meeting for public comment. Issues or items that are not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, begin by stating their name, and limit remarks to less than 3 minutes. Council members may request that a discussed item be placed on a future agenda. The council takes public comment on all regular agenda items during the discussion of those items. Do we have people today who would like to make public comment? Michael? Guy?
I come bearing gifts. Michael Looney, VP of Economic Development for the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce. And this is my trusted colleague here, Guy Andrews, who is Executive Director of COSA-DC, City of San Angelo Development Corporation. I want to take just a couple minutes before we get started this morning. We have 2 press releases that we'd like to give to the city and to COSA-DC for a transaction that we've been working on collectively for the past 2 years. And this is a company called SMC Global Corporation. SMC Global is a company that came to us about 18 months ago. We had heard that they were out in the market looking for a small warehouse in Midland. We got word of that and changed their minds. We decided it would be a really good idea to be in San Angelo instead. And then through developing relationships with the company and understanding more about what they do and the capabilities that they have, producing oil field chemicals, but chemicals for lots and lots of other types of industries, our relationship blossomed. And that relationship was not just chamber and this company, it was community, citizens, it was council members, it was the mayor, it was Guy Andrews and Bob Schneeman and his staff, and we all worked very closely together on taking this company from a small warehouse to 140,000 square foot footprint, and they are continuing to grow and to do very well in the community. We do thank you all for your support. The company leadership of SMC Global came into town last week to share a meal and to discuss with us their future plans. They're very, very pleased with San Angelo. They're extremely pleased with the welcoming that they've had. They consider San Angelo to be the standard by which all the other cities that they are in are measured. They are in Switzerland, they are in China, they are in Kershaw, South Carolina, they are in Kansas City, Kansas. They have offices in New York and in Houston. And so we're very proud of the work that we've done, and we wanted to take just a quick minute and recognize COSA-DC and also recognize the SMD that the very large expansion was done. It was 100,000 square feet. This was the old R.G. Berry building, which had been vacant for, we think, around 20 years. Which is now being inhabited by SMC Global. And that was Councilman Hebert. That was in his SMD. And so we wanted to present you all with a framed copy of the press release and let you know that more is on the way. And we thank you all very much for your support.
Thank you.
What do you have to say, Guy? Wasn't that a great deal? Thanks. All right. Thank you, sir.
Further public comment?
Morning, Bob Schneeman with the city's Economic Development Department. item takes a great deal of courage on my part, but since performance evaluations are over for another year, I'd just like to let everybody know that today is Guy Andrews' birthday.
There you go. Anna?
Good morning, Mayor, Council,
Good morning.
Mr. Valenzuela. First of all, I want to thank everybody for the efforts on the work on Foster Road. The improvements have been wonderful. However, during the last rain, we had the 6-inch thereabout rain.
Which we're praying for again.
Yes, we are praying for again. I just want to, visiting with my neighbor who is 2 doors down, after that rain, they had 2 fish in their backyard. So he was telling me that the water does come from his northwest corner, which means it's draining out of Bentwood. So somebody in Bentwood is minus 2 fish in their pond, stocked pond. But I'm saying this because of the apartment building that is projected to be built. Does the city, surely they plan on drainage, and where does that water drain to? We tend to get water out of Bentwood, so I'm hoping that's not going to increase the water that continually flows through our backyards. Even with all the new improvements, we're still getting the water from Bentwood flowing. So is there plans for drainage, plans to get that water to the river other than via our backyards? So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Further public comment?
Good morning, Council. I am an interested citizen. I live right next door in the patio
State your
homes.
name, please, for the record.
My concern is
Would you go ahead and speak your name again? The microphone wasn't picking it up.
Betty Dameron.
Thank you.
I live in 401 in the patio homes. We have a lot of the people from the patio homes as well as the manor that walk across to the park. And that walkway right there at that entrance is just horrendous. It's a raceway on that road. I have asked Mr. Thomas about maybe doing something to enhance that walkway. Lights on the sign, paint the stripes bigger, a sign in the middle of the road, something, because people will be in the walkway and cars will drive right on by them. And these are, like I told Mr. Thomas, little old widow women with their puppy dogs crossing the street. We need some help with that walkway, whatever you can do.
Thank you. Is Shane Kelton here this morning? Shane, if you'll get with her later about what we might be able to do. It is dangerous and it is a speedway, so I'd like some way to make sure we protect the citizens crossing that street. Thank you.
We have 2 items, Mayor. One of them, which we have the police chief have some more patrols in there if those people are exceeding the speed limit.
I don't think anybody heard anything you said.
I think we need to look at having the police chief look at having additional patrols in that particular area. If people are exceeding the speed limit, we need to see if we can take care of that. And then Shane can look at what we can do about signage. We have some signs, and I know the DOT has them, where they actually have solar panels that light the yield signs, because I've seen them in town, and we'll have to just look to see whether or not those are available.
Thank you. Any further public comment? With no further public comment, we will move into the consent agenda. I am going to start with Billy and ask if she has anything that she would like to pull from the consent agenda.
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to pull items F, item G, and item M.
Lane.
I have nothing to pull.
Lucy.
I just have item I.
I. Harry.
Nothing to pull.
Tommy. P. All right. With the following items being pulled, F, G, I, M, which is me, N, and P being pulled from the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda?
So moved.
That, with a motion by Tom, a second by Lucy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, consent agenda passes with a 6-0. We will start now with item F. Consider approving task order number 109-A with KSA Engineers Incorporated for professional services relating to San Angelo Regional Airport taxiway reconfiguration project in the amount of $62,331. Jeremy, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Council. This is with our last FAA grant that we did. We did a taxiway reconfiguration project. About a little over a year ago, we signed a change order to do some additional work. We failed to put the engineering portion of that change order in there. So additional admin fees and project representative fees. We basically have to hire a babysitter to make sure the contractor does everything to FAA spec. So this is just to increase their quantities, to increase their time. We do know we're $100,000 under budget in this account, so this amount will be accounted for. There's budget money to do it. And the FAA has concurred, and they'll pay 90% of this cost.
All right, Billy, do you have a question for Jeremy?
Jeremy, good morning, and thank you. I understand that this work was fully funded by a grant. And when I was reading the background material, it was talking about a delay. So was that delay because something wasn't put in the original plan that we had to go back? Is that what I understood you to say?
That was before my time, but I think the delay was waiting for me to get here.
Oh, okay.
We had some paint. The FAA changed the spec a little bit on paint. I think we were also waiting for the FAA to make the determination on how we were going to paint the entrance into the terminal for the aircraft.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I just wanted to understand what the cause for the delay was on that. So I appreciate, thank you.
Sure.
Just want to make an announcement. Williston, North Dakota is getting $250 million to redo their airport, so just putting that out there.
I'll make a note, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we will go on to item G.
We have a motion?
Do I need to go ahead and do this one? Do I have a motion to approve item F?
So moved,
And
Mayor.
a second?
Second.
A second by Lane. Any public comment? With no.
Pressure's on for Jeremy now.
Yeah, we need that. Okay, so with that, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Item G, consider authorizing the city manager to execute a renewal of a contract with Downtown San Angelo, Inc. for a 5-year term. Billy, do you have questions?
Sort of, Mayor.
Okay.
But I understand, that the Downtown Inc. does great work for the city of San Angelo and work hard to keep it a vibrant district. When I was reading the report that came to us, it talked about there not needing to be a formal report to the city council. My only concern with that is that the citizens of San Angelo don't really have an appreciation, my opinion, of what all it involves in maintaining a vibrant downtown San Angelo. So I wonder, why would we cut out having Downtown Inc. present the city council just with an update even of what's going on?
They do quarterly reports, Billy. If that contract said they don't, they do quarterly reports, and they will be presenting at the next city council meeting. So if the language in that contract said they do not report, they do report quarterly and are required to report quarterly.
And
Okay,
the
let me just read to you what it
Okay.
says, Mayor. It says that it removed reference to Downtown Development Commission, which was disbanded, removes the requirement for the city council to review performance measures annually, removes the requirement for a twice yearly oral presentation to the city council.
That's wrong.
Well, no, if you keep reading, it says, but retains the requirement for a report. So
Yeah.
what it does, it allows them to either submit a written report or to present in front of council. If a particular council wants them to come make a presentation, you can always ask for that. This simply doesn't require it in the agreement. It allows them to submit a written, but it still does require that reporting.
Okay. Well, I would like to see us continue to get, because I think citizens, you know, I get a lot of feedback that they listen to Channel 17 or whatever it is on DirecTV, and I would like for them to be aware of the effort that goes into doing what we do in this city. So I'd like to continue to get verbal, oral updates. And I know Dale is probably frowning at me back there. But,
No, he isn't, because he loves doing those reports. Right, Dale?
Don't you, Dale?
Shake your head yes. Yes, so he will continue, and like I said, we will have a new report at next city council meeting, not the budget meeting, but the city council meeting.
Well, thank you. And with that, I move to approve item G on the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Second by Tommy. Any public comment?
Steve Hampton, Billy has hit a home run, and I commend her for bringing this to our attention. Indeed, these people who take the dollar need to come and report about it. Thank you.
Any further public comment? With no further public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Item I, consider resolution approving annual recertification for Galilee Community Development Corporation as a community housing development organization. Bob?
Good morning.
Bob, all I wanted you to do is go ahead and remind us of this program so our constituents will get
Sure.
refresher.
This is the annual recertification that HUD requires that all CHODOs, which is a community housing development organizations, submit their application, which is relatively thick, and basically they are allowed to receive 15% automatically from our home funds. If we don't get a CHODO that participates, that money goes back to the feds. So it's important that we have the money here. It's important that we keep organizations interested in affordable housing active. And this program allows us to do that.
I move to approve as presented.
A second by Harry. Any public comment on this item, I. With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 6-0. The next item is item N. It is consider a resolution supporting an expansion of the Central Texas Corridor as part of the I-14 expansion, and I will read that resolution. A resolution of the City of San Angelo supporting the designation of an expansion of the Central Texas Corridor as a part of the I-14 Gulf Coast Strategic Highway System. Whereas Texas has become a magnet for job and population growth from all regions of the United States and is adding population by more than 1,000 people per day. And whereas the Texas Demographic Center projected in 2019 that the Texas population will reach 47.4 million by 2050, which represents an 88.3% increase over the next 30 years. And whereas the I-14 Gulf Coast Strategic Highway System will provide significant additional transportation capacity to help the state of Texas accommodate these growth trends, and at the same time will provide economic development opportunities in counties along the Central Texas Corridor. And whereas Texas has become the most prolific producer of oil and natural gas in the United States and is now a net exporter of energy to world markets. And whereas the I-14 Gulf Coast Strategic Highway System will provide a needed link between the world's most prolific oil and gas producing region in the Permian Basin and our Gulf Coast seaports. And whereas the I-14 Gulf Coast Strategic Highway System will provide a safe and efficient transportation artery between our state's military facilities and those of neighboring states and their strategic deployment ports at Beaumont and Corpus Christi. And whereas the I-14 corridor across Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi will provide a needed future alternative to Interstate 10 and Interstate 20 for cross-country travel, including freight traffic, which in Texas is projected to double by 2040. And Whereas the I-14 Gulf Coast Strategic Highway System will provide improved means of evacuating coastal areas and will provide a high elevation alternative to periodic closures of sections of Interstate 10 due to high water. And whereas Representative Brian Babin and 10 House co-sponsors from Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi have introduced H.R. 2220 to accomplish an expanded I-14 designation. Therefore, be it resolved by the City of San Angelo City Council, Section 1, the City of San Angelo supports congressional legislative action expanding the Central Texas Corridor and establishing a Central Louisiana Corridor and a Central Mississippi Corridor, and that each expanded segment of these corridors be designated as a part of the future Interstate Route 14. Section 2, as defined in the 116th Congress, H.R. 2220-1-14, Expansion and Improvement Act of 2019, the expanded Central Texas Corridor designation should commence at SH 338 in Odessa and then should generally follow State Highway 158 from Midland to Sterling City and then follow US 87 from Sterling City through San Angelo to Brady. And the Central Texas Corridor should include interstate spur connectors, generally following the US 83 from Eden to Junction, US 69 from Woodville to Beaumont, and US 96 from Jasper to Beaumont. Do I have any public comment on this resolution? With none?
I have a question,
Yes,
Mayor.
ma'am.
How close are we to, with this resolution, how close are we to having a final determination made, or is that possible to predict?
It's not possible to predict. Obviously, this resolution has no monetary value attached to it, so it depends on our ability to get somebody to designate funds from the federal government to help support this. But if we don't have local support and people along the way supporting it, there will never be a consideration for putting federal monies towards this project.
Okay. So are there other cities, areas, routes that we're in competition with, that, you know, they want the I-14 to go through their corridor?
There always will be conversations. Obviously, everyone understands the importance of interstate or improved highways as a means to improve a community. So there will always be some challenges, and it will be up to the local communities, TxDOT, and representatives to determine the exact route that will be taken.
With that, I move to approve this item on our agenda.
With a motion and a second, do we have any further public comment? With none, I will take a vote to accept this resolution. All in favor?
Aye.
With none opposed, the resolution is approved, 6-0. We will now go into item N, consider approving revised bylaws approved by the Fort Concho Museum Board. Bob?
Morning, Mayor, Council.
Morning.
Morning.
This is part of a rewrite of all bylaws for all city commissions and advisory boards per the city attorney. I think we changed some of the titles. Our board president is no longer a president, she's a chair. We changed a few of the language issues, and there was some other minor housekeeping things that were addressed to fit the state and the city rules. So I stand ready if you have any questions.
No questions. Do I have a motion?
So move.
And a second by who? Lane, thank you. Public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 6-0. We will move on to item B, consider resolution responding to the application of Atmos Energy Corporation Mid-Tex Division to increase rates under the Gas Reliability Infrastructure Program, suspending the effective date of this rate application for 45 days, authorizing the city to continue to participate in a coalition of cities known as the, quote, Atmos Texas Municipalities, determining that the meeting at which the resolution was adopted complied with the Texas Open Meetings Act, making such other findings and provisions related to the subject, declaring an effective date. Teresa?
Yes, did you have questions, Tommy?
Just explain
what this is doing, yes?
Okay, Atmos on June 13th filed for an increase in their rates. The increase for a residential customer would be $2.84 per bill, is what we're anticipating. So under the rate process, we are able to pass a resolution that suspends that rate from going into effect so that we, along with other cities, can evaluate what they're proposing to determine whether or not we feel like we should file a rate case. So that's what this does. It postpones it for a period of time to let us evaluate it. Another item today, we denied the rate increase, and that might be what ends up happening with this Atmos one, but that will be at a future meeting.
So this is simply putting things on hold with our other partner cities that are served by Atmos. Is that correct?
That's correct, so that we can all study the rate structure they're proposing to see if everything's allowed.
Point, there would be a determination whether or not rates would increase.
Whether or not we deny their rate increase, which could send it to a rate proceeding where a decision is finally made.
Is the rate increase based, because natural gas prices are pretty low right now and have not increased. So the increases can't be based off of the commodity of natural gas. So the rate increase would be based off of.
Well, I think that's one of the things that we're wanting to study. Generally, they relate to the infrastructure that's involved. The total increase that they're asking for is $67.1 million. Our region's portion of that would be the $6.6 million. But that is one of the things we're going to study to see specifically what they are asking to be the increases related to.
Tommy?
I'd move approval, item P.
A second?
Second.
And a second. Is there any public comment?
Thank you, Mayor. What needs, I think.
Your name, please?
Steve Hampton. What needs to be added to this is a percentage increase. I believe it's an impressive amount, 15 for the resident and 20, over 20 for the commercial. So that seems an unreasonable increase. Thank you.
Any further public comment? With no further public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. With that item, I believe we have covered everything on the consent agenda unless I have missed something. We got it. All right, we will now move into the regular agenda, and we will start today with the update on the housing study conducted by Community Development Strategies, presentation made by Community Development Strategies President Steve Spillett.
I'd like to preface with a few comments about the comprehensive housing study. It truly has been a comprehensive study, as evidenced by the 158-page report that has been produced in great detail. It was a community-wide effort that involved a lot of people. Our city and county staffs included our San Angelo Realtors Association, and particularly wanted to single out Candy Poole and Terry Jackson for the excellent support that they provided. Without that information, this wouldn't have happened. We also included Goodfellow Air Force Base, Angelo State, Howard College, our apartment owners, the Home Builders Association, our banking community, and the list goes on and on. So it truly is a community-wide effort.
A lot of citizens input.
A lot of citizens input. We did a survey that was completed by over 1,300 citizens in regard to their housing needs and desires and that sort of thing. So having prefaced that, I would like to introduce to you Steve Spillett, who's the president of Community Development Strategies that conducted our study, and also with him is Mike Pratt, that's here to answer questions as well. So Steve.
Thank you, Guy, and good morning. Steve Spillett, president of CDS Community Development Strategies from Houston. We're just a small market analysis consulting firm studying issues related to real estate development and land use planning. So we were brought on by the city to conduct a housing demand study to assess how much demand there is for additional housing of various types and prices in San Angelo. And I believe that Guy has made sure that that study has been distributed to everyone for you all to read. I'm just going to do a quick summary of the findings from our work, and then we can take some questions and comments. And again, I also want to reiterate the gratitude to which that we have for all the cooperation we received in doing this research. It was really, really critical in any of these studies, and in San Angelo, it was incredibly helpful to hear from the major employers and the realtor community, the builder and developer community, et cetera, all providing extremely valuable information to our work. So in any type of housing study that we do, the most important kind of background or foundational information that we need is the economic and the demographic context, because that is from which it is your economy, essentially, from which housing demand is derived in almost all communities, and San Angelo no exception to that. You have ongoing job and population growth. Based on the information we have, we are projecting about 1,900 jobs happening just in the next year, additional job growth. It was kind of the estimate that we were working off of. But it's important to understand that your employment picture in San Angelo is dominated by moderate wage and middle income jobs. The data that we have show that just over half of the households here make less than $50,000 a year. Your median household income was approximately $46,000 a year in 2017. So you're you're dominated by moderate wage and middle income income profile, and so that translates a lot into the types of housing that are needed here. Just so to give you a picture of that, we calculate that the corresponding level of affordability, if you're buying a home and you're around the median income level here, median household income level, that would be about $180,000, about the sort of the maximum level that you should really be affording, especially if you're a first-time buyer, or maximum rental price of about $1,200 a month. That's at 30% of your gross income going to direct housing expenses. So that gives you, and that's really a maximum. That's the maximum level of affordability that we would recommend.
Is that based off of using low interest rates that exist today, or?
Yes, we for the for sale model, that's using current interest rates and basically assuming an FHA insured mortgage at 3.5% down payment.
Because we're at historic interest rate levels, low.
So yes, I mean, so that's current rates, and they're so low that they're unlikely to go lower. They're more likely to go up than down.
When we calculated the figure for the affordability table that's in the report, I went and pulled for the zip codes in San Angelo what the average mortgage rate was at the time. So that was just a month and a half ago. So that's the mortgage rate that would be reflected in this.
Those would be high numbers. Yes. Thank you.
So to summarize the single-family for sale market here in San Angelo, it's predominantly a seller's market with about roughly 3 months worth of inventory. So that's a tight supply overall. Your median 2018 housing price for existing homes was about $166,000. The main thing that you need to take away on the for sale side is that your dominant market is under 250,000, because once you go above that level, the level of demand, the volume of demand really drops off quite quickly. And so homes that are in the price ranges above that for existing homes, they stay on the market much, much longer than homes in that sort of $150,000 to $250,000 range. And the supply of homes under $200,000, remember I said, we estimated the maximum level of affordability for median income households being around $180,000. Supply of homes under $200,000 has decreased from 86% in 2011 to 68% in 2018. You also have growing competition from cash buyers. Those might be folks that are either investors intending to buy homes and rent them out, or they might be folks that are perhaps they're retirees from elsewhere and sold another home and have moved here with a lot of cash equity from that previous sale. Bottom line is that for your middle class buyers, and especially folks that are trying to buy their first house coming out of rental, the market is very tight and getting tighter, and the supply of homes in the ranges that those buyers need has been shrinking a lot.
Would you remind everyone what the report says about the percentage of how full our apartments are today?
Well, if I could just actually wait to that, because I'm gonna address rental housing now. So rental housing. The occupancies overall in your apartment, in your multifamily apartments, so these are larger apartment complexes, is very high, about 96%, so they're very full. There's not much available. Your average rents have gone up 5% in just 12 months and 25% just since 2017. So they've been going up quite a bit. I know you had a pretty dramatic average rise in lease rates back during the previous oil boom, 2012, 2013 time frame. Well, it's kind of happening again because the rents never actually decreased when oil stagnated in 2015, 2016. So we just continue to go up. You've had about 1,100 units built in the last 10 years, but those are weighted towards the high end of the rental market. Over half of those units that were added have average rent over $1,000. And that includes just like the one-bedroom units being over $1,000 a month. So,
excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
what time frame was, you said there were 1,100 units built since, what was?
Last 10 years.
Thank you.
And you should also know that it is very difficult, and this is not a San Angelo specific problem or even a Texas specific problem. It's a national issue that financially it is very difficult for apartment developers to build to the middle income market. When they build new apartments, it's pretty much either going to be to the top of the market, or if they're going through a program such as the low-income housing tax credit program, where the renters are limited to maximum 80% of median income, and much of the units, well below that. So that sort of working class, lower middle class, or middle class renter market is very difficult to build large new apartment complexes for financially, and that's a national problem. We also found that even though you're not in the midst of the Permian oil boom here, you are starting to feel the effects again of what happened in 2012 to 2014. Those renters are showing up here again in San Angelo. Those are very high-paid employees. They're not necessarily, they're living here because housing has gotten so difficult and conditions are so undesirable elsewhere in the Permian. So they're renting here and commuting back out to the oil field, 2-hour drive each way every day. But the point is that when you have those kind of renters coming back into the market, they're going to tend to push rents higher, and they can afford to pay more than a lot of your local workers can. The people who are actually working here in San Angelo. Another thing that we determined was that about 6,500 of your renter households, so households that are living in rented housing units, are what we would consider cost burden. The standard, again, being 30% of your gross income going to direct housing costs. This is 2017 data, so it's actually a couple years old at this point, but it was the most recent data we had. that 6,500 cost-burdened renter households, that's nearly half of all renter households. So almost half of your renters are paying a lot more of their income for housing than what is considered as a federal standard is desirable in order to have enough income left over to do things like feed your family and take care of your health. And when you go down to even lower income levels, 81% of the renter households that make under $35,000 a year are cost burdened. So, I mean, for folks that, and you have, a lot of folks working in this community that are in that income range. So we have a pretty major housing cost issue for anyone here that's lower to moderate wage income and is renting, which most of those households are going to be renters. We also looked at single-family rentals, not just large apartment complexes, but individual homes for rent. Met with a number of the landlords that handle those kinds of that kind of housing. Their average to rent for those units is mid to high 800s per month. So that's an important, especially for folks that are renter households with children, families with children. That's a critical element of your market. Demand is very, very strong. There's almost no vacancy. As soon as a rental home comes available, someone is there waiting to snap it up. So very tight market for that. It's an important part of your affordable housing market. Especially a shortage of moderately priced 3-bedroom rentals, and the landlords are very aware that this is a really critical element of your housing supply for much of your workforce here in San Angelo. So overall, when it comes to the rental housing market, compared to other markets that we have been working in, for example, Odessa, we can't necessarily call it a crisis, but you're on that path. And so we were definitely concerned, especially on the rental side, like where you're headed with that. We did a demand analysis to try to quantify how much additional housing you need developed. We project demand for almost 3,700 additional housing units over the next 24 months, 2 years. We are aware of somewhere between 930 to around 1,100 units that are in the development pipeline at various price levels or for sale or rental total. So that still leaves another couple thousand units, at over 2,000 units that are going to be needed just during that time. Not to mention, and that's really deriving principally from additional job growth, and not to even mention the folks that are cost burdened or have other negative housing situations right now that really need some alternative to move to. Some of the developments coming up that we're aware of, you have some single-family rental developments. That's actually a new product type to Texas, where you have a large tract that's going to be detached homes, but they're for rent. So that will address part of the market that those are needed. They're not likely to be serving necessarily your moderate wage renters. There's still demand, there's still housing needed for higher wage renters, so this will help with that, especially ones with families, especially folks that are here for their employment and training at Goodfellow. We expect that they're going to probably soak up a fair amount of those rental homes. But that's just one part of the market. The single-family development that's going on, as far as anything sort of large-scale subdivision-wise and so on, will address some of the kind of upper middle class or higher wage market. But again, overall volume of demand peters out. Once you're starting to get in those upper price ranges for San Angelo. So the upper income ranges are going to have some relief through some of this additional supply, but for your low and moderate and middle income renters and your entry-level housing buyers, there's definitely an insufficient supply. You need more supply of homes in those price ranges. that should be where the emphasis is, as far as what you take away, is that we need to find ways to bring greater supply of those homes into the market. We know that on the for sale side, there are local builders that are trying to produce for sale homes for that entry level. It's not easy. A key element of that is, instead of going to large sites on the perimeter of the city, it's looking for infill locations. So within existing neighborhoods, you do have either vacant or redevelopable tracts that have infrastructure, either utility infrastructure, either to those sites or nearby. That's going to be a much more affordable way of getting new housing, especially in those needed price ranges constructed. We would advise that the city, where there are issues for sites that what we would call off-site infrastructure needs, or even substantial internal infrastructure needs for public infrastructure, that the city would consider doing some sort of partnership to help defray the costs for builders that are addressing those, entry-level or moderate wage price ranges, because infrastructure costs are a key element of costs of developing housing.
Steve, a question for you.
Yes.
When you mentioned infill, did your study look, I'm going to say geographically, at areas that are either beginning some infill in that particular area, or areas that might be ripe or available for infill? Did the study review that?
We didn't necessarily conduct a strict inventory of infill sites, but we did get to visit, observe, and also talk to developers who are working on the north side of the city, because you do have a number of either vacant or redevelopable sites, and that's where a fair amount of this new for sale entry-level housing is being built. We view that as a huge positive. I mean, that is totally the direction that we would recommend going. Obviously, historically, because of the economic conditions in that part of town, land values have been historically a little bit cheaper, so it makes it easier to acquire and develop in those price ranges. Over time, as the north side, if that development continues, there will be revitalization, and land values may start to rise, and so that's going to be a challenge. But for now, I mean, I think that it is important that that kind of development continues, because, I mean, we have builders that are delivering new homes in the $150,000 to $170,000 range, and for entry-level housing buyers, I mean, that's right where it needs to be. And these aren't junk homes; these are decent quality homes that are serving a very, very important need. And these builders are telling us that, they're getting deluged with phone calls from people that before, as soon as sticks start coming out of the ground, when can I buy this home? I mean, that tells you a lot. So, I would strongly urge the city to look at its regulatory and permitting processes to make sure that infill development of those kind of homes is there's no barriers, unnecessary barriers to making that happen. Another element of a really important element that we recommend is that on the rental side especially, although it can also work for sale, that different types of housing structures that hadn't, in recent history, had not been a major part of the market. These are things like duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, fourplexes. If you compare the cost, the construction cost for those and the site requirements and other things to doing a big apartment complex, those are much more affordable to get built. And so for new housing, when you're developing new housing, if we're trying to do something that's going to be able to target moderate wage renters, which is what you need, that kind of housing is a way to help address that. And also, it's very well because we're not talking about needing, a large acreage site as you would for a large apartment complex. It's a way to also address, to do that on infill sites within existing neighborhoods. And we would strongly urge that your zoning, regulatory, and permitting processes are structured to allow that kind of development to happen.
If I could just add that the data that we looked at showed that only 4 units of that type of housing had been approved or permitted in the last 10 years. So I think that's kind of proof that the existing, regulations don't allow, and this isn't just a San Angelo issue. Every city that has single-family zoning in America, it's basically illegal to build this type of moderate, priced housing in existing single-family neighborhoods. So looking at existing single-family zone neighborhoods and making sure that it's legal to build duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes, new construction, that'd be very key, for San Angelo, because it would allow developers and builders to come in and produce, new units of that type of housing. And again, if only 4 units of that type of housing has been permitted in the last 10 years in the city, I think that's kind of proof that there's some issues regulatory-wise that are not allowing for product of that type to be constructed new.
I know that this is an issue nationwide, but I say the following: we all live here in San Angelo, and we're not trying to run every other community in the world, but we do need to make sure that there's a quality of life available to the citizens who have selected San Angelo to be their home. We know that the quality of life absolutely starts with housing, and quality of life is hard to have if you don't have adequate housing. I believe strongly that we have to look at, and I'm going to ask for Michael Dane to give me an update on where we are on the project of infill. We have too much regulation right now for infill and too much delay because of the existing zoning and requirements by our Planning and Permits Department, which are creating long delays and unnecessary delays because of the expectation. So we have hurt ourselves over the past few months because of our regulations, our fees, our planning and permits, who are trying to ask that infill be equal to all other areas of town, which it is not, and particularly not when you're looking at a $150,000 to $160,000 home. We have to have housing. We cannot continue to consider ourselves a quality of life city if we don't have affordable housing. I know that many cities, and again I say we're responsible for our city, they are relooking at, for example, in the past, Austin is saying where before a single family home could only be built on X acreage or percentage, and now they're allowing and reconsidering in infill areas 3 homes on that same lot. We have to address the housing issue. These numbers and the comments from many citizens about housing being unaffordable in this city is really, we can't be doing that. We've got to look at, and yes, there will be some day that the oil and gas industry will not be as impactful as it is now, but that industry does hurt those people who are in regular jobs and who aren't attached to the oil field industry. We are at an all-time low interest rate, so there's more available than ever before. But at the same point in time, even though interest rates are low, the cost of construction continues to rise because of tariffs, labor costs, et cetera. So interest rates help us, but the cost of building today is reaching an all-time high.
Yes.
And so they offset each other. So we have to look at it. I know that we have asked that Michael Dane look at some issues in terms of infill. Where are we on getting that project completed?
Mayor, we've infill consideration has taken 2 distinct tracks. One has to do with incentivizing and assisting on from a financial perspective, and Bob Solis can give us an update on where we're at on that. The other has to do with regulation, and John James can give us an update on that.
This is a time crunch issues. Rick, you want to add a comment?
I just would add that when it comes to the planning, and John can do that, but I believe our planning staff has done a good job of working with people. Our challenge comes in with the fact that in a lot of cases, for instance, if infill is having a street requirement, there's a lot of times where we can meet that. If the street in that section is narrower and it's a dead-end area that doesn't pass through, then planning is very good at working with them to try to adjust that. If the street continues on to another neighborhood, then it's harder to reduce. So there's complications that come in, and each case is unique. And so that's how they look at it, from a unique case as every infill opportunity. But I believe planning is trying really hard. Now, they work with a lot of different areas, such as stormwater. So is that infill, if you put in 10 houses instead of 2, are you having more stormwater that you have to deal with? So they work with all those different entities from a planning standpoint. They also have to look at water and sewer largely. Some of those areas currently are only served by septic systems. Okay, that's good. Can we get sewer to that? And then how do we pay for that? So that's where council will come in and making some decisions that can help staff drastically in those infill. Currently, we don't really have a program that subsidizes those. Now, it may make good sense that we do subsidize those because those are areas that we're doing inside the city limits without extending out, as the mayor was pointing out. Those are good things, but those are some areas where when they bring back a plan, it's going to bring something that allows council to make some decisions that can help us then make those things happen easier.
We just need to make the focus on making it happen, not the issues that complicate it. We got to make this happen. The numbers, the statistics, this report is very alarming. And again, quality of life starts with housing. So we've got to address all of those issues and find a way to say, yes, let's move this forward. And I know you all are working on it, but we are needing housing now. So we need to be all over it now. And this infill project has to be number one in terms of our focus.
We had just a couple other recommendations before we wrap up that I wanted to make.
Before we move away from that, those gentlemen are here and they're able to provide an update if you'd like one now, Mayor.
You want to wrap up, and then I'll open it up to more questions and comments from council, so we can do that. So go ahead and you guys be ready to talk, okay?
Okay, real quick. Just a couple other recommendations. We recommend a ramping up of for people who are trying to move into homeownership, first-time homeownership. A housing navigation center would combine homebuyer education. That's something that we heard a lot about, that buyers are not necessarily, that maybe could have the income to be able to get into some of these entry-level homes, but financially, in other ways, they're not quite ready. So having buyers who are ready and can compete with people like investors, basically they're qualified for mortgages, they're ready to go in and have their paperwork in order, that's going to help them better compete for the homes that they are, that in the price ranges that they need. Secondly, and this is something not necessarily that the city would have to direct, but the community as a whole, that the development and builder community could explore, and the financial community could explore partnerships with some of your major local employers. For example, if someone was trying to create new rental housing to serve your middle-income workforce, are there ways that your major employers might be able to financially or in a credit situation partner with some of those folks to perhaps have lease guarantees for some of those units that might help the developers and builders have the credit to make those projects happen. So there's opportunities for partnerships outside of city government that could also be brought into play there. And I think that summarizes kind of where we are.
Thank you for that. And Bob, you want to come forward first?
Yes, ma'am. We put together a working group to look at infill incentives. And the group came up with a program design that would allow a stipend of about $1,500 for new infill development in our neighborhoods we targeted for revitalization. Turns out, if you look at the map of infill vacant lots, it's those areas that are majority of the vacant lots available. So we kind of, the program design kind of focuses on those areas with a $1,500 for sewer tap and water tap. So $1,500 per unit up to 8 units. So that's something that we put together. We looked at funding it through the Affordable Housing Program through Costa DC. Turns out we can't. It doesn't meet the criteria, unfortunately. So we're looking for funding. If we can we're looking to target about $50,000, and if we can get that, that'll get us started. And I think that would be it would help move that program forward a little bit.
Have we just simply looked at the existing fees that we have and looked at reducing those fees that would ultimately equal up to $1,500 worth of reduced fees, so you don't have to go look for a funding source? We just re-review what we established earlier this year about increasing the fees for builders, et cetera, because we need to relook at those and not have that sort of up to 100% of the cost being covered by fees, and lower those fees, then you found your financial source to cover them.
Mayor,
Yes,
Mayor,
sir.
that proposal is exactly how we came up with this number, is to offset the cost of a water and sewer tap for an infill project. If we simply take those fees to zero, then that effectively places the full burden of the funding on the water and sewer funds, and we can do that. That is a valid proposal. We just have, in the past, have been looking for, we have a very supportive Costa DC board and staff, and they obviously are in touch with, to the extent possible, the housing issues, and we were anticipating Costa DC playing a key role in funding in some fashion. We've recently discovered that we cannot do that, whether with Costa DC dollars or Costa DC housing dollars.
No one's suggesting that they go to zero. What I'm suggesting is we can't keep increasing those fees. So we need to stop with the increases on those fees or re-review all of that, because earlier this year we talked about trying to get to 30%, 50%, 75%, 100% of the cost of service, and we need to re-review that conversation and not look at increasing those fees, because the cost of a home starts with the fees.
Well, Mary, if you'd like, we could put an agenda item together to discuss this program and possible funding alternatives to attempt through the financial side to provide assistance for that kind of activity. For some of those lots, that's going to be just what it takes. For some, it's going to take more than that, because they're actually having to create the infrastructure. But we'll cover that in that discussion if you're ready to have that discussion and move ahead with that.
I think, from
Remember,
my
there are two sides
yeah.
of the coin, and I think you touched on it earlier, both a financial side and a regulatory side. And we were hoping to address both of those in one action, but this side is ready to go, and the regulatory side may take a little deeper conversation.
I strongly believe in this conversation. I need support to make sure we get affordable housing, because quality of life, and I repeat it again, starts with where people live, and we can't have it without affordable living. Infill is hugely important, and infill areas need to have special consideration in terms of what we ask them to do. The number was given to me sometime last week, and I'm not going to quote it because I don't have total recall on it, but the dollar it costs per 1,000 feet to put in sewer and water is what? $38,000?
Per foot, did you say?
1,000 feet.
Oh, I think that's low for 1,000 feet. I think it's higher than that for 1,000 feet.
So when you put that in perspective, you can't absorb $38,000 worth of water and sewer infrastructure for a home that's $160,000.
We were working with a builder who was had to put in much less pipe than that, and had to pay, I think his price was $54,000 for.
It was expensive.
And we're looking at a $160,000 home, and it's $54,000 worth of water and sewer. It can happen, you know, and so what we've got to do is relook at what it costs, what we can absorb, what we've got to look at this. This is huge priority for me right now, huge.
Well, we're ready on this side. We're ready to have that discussion with council. The issue we face on this side is we were hoping for a relatively painless funding source, and I think we're at the point where we're going to have to talk about paying for things that traditionally we don't pay for as cities in the development process. But other than that, the concepts are ready to be discussed. So if you'd like, we'll bring an agenda item back when you're ready.
City council meeting?
Yes, ma'am, next city council meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
And
John?
on the
While John is coming, I just want to say to Michael, you kind of scare me when you make a statement like you just did that we're going to have to pay for things that traditionally we haven't paid for before, because we don't have that kind of money in the coffers. So that just kind of makes me a little bit anxious, and I'll just put that on the table right now.
You're right, and we don't have to, but if we want to stimulate this activity, one of the solutions is that we participate as a partner in that cost, and that is very much a policy decision that is fully within your control.
And the other issue with that is always remember, an infill area brings very little property tax dollars to the city. A home built on an infill lot brings more property taxes to it. So we also have to take a look at what that development can bring in terms of a property tax increase in that district, which can be huge. And all of those things have to be taken into consideration. And I'm not asking that the city take the hit on everything, but if part of our financial picture is property tax dollars and infill's bringing zero, there's an opportunity there.
Mayor, I do want to point out as well that as far as specific to infill infrastructure, for the most part, is already there. So really the impact of the city does look at implementing a program where we do reduce fees specific to those infills to kind of incentivize that. That cost to the city would be lower than any other developed area, because those developed areas have to bring in all new infrastructure.
Correct.
So it would be just on our end, we'd have to be looking at a gap that would have to be filled. And we would have to do an analysis on the impact on the cities, for example, the water department. However, as the mayor mentioned a while ago, there is a direct impact anytime that there's a vacant lot, that really, when you look at the value of that lot, how much we actually collect in those property taxes is going to be much lower. So there is an offset that we'd have to take a look at as well. But yes, there is a sense of urgency to get this done as soon as possible. So yes, Mayor, we will have an item on the next City Council agenda.
John?
And the other prong that Michael talked about was looking at our development ordinances, and so we've got a list of some strategies. In fact, they'll be going to the Development Task Force, the group that we meet with every other month. They'll be going later this month.
Great, John.
Some things like reducing street standards in areas where the streets are already built, but maybe they were built 50 years ago to a smaller, narrower standard, not requiring those developments to build to our brand new standard. So that's just one example of reducing the requirements for those infill areas.
Well, and even when you speak about our brand new standard, I mean, there's one thing called infill, we're going to talk about infill being in the $160,000 range for homes, but then you also have homes, as we said, up to $200,000 homes. So there's also in other areas where, in fact, is not infill, it's new development. We need to look and say, are those, quote, new standards the right standards for this community who has a issue of moderate income as a large percentage of this city? So if you're looking at $46,000 as the median income, is that the correct terminology? Okay, so if you take a look at those numbers, it's not just about infill, it's about other areas as well. And we need to look at whether those ordinances that we've put into place provide for quality homes at affordable prices, whether they're infill or not.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned that. One of the things that we've also looked at, and this has already gone to the Development Task Force, is looking at those general street standards, not specific to infill.
Thank you.
And so, for example, for a brand new local residential street, we require those streets to be 40 feet wide. That's much wider than any of our peer cities. And so at that we're looking at reducing as our standard for anywhere. But then beyond that, we're looking at a standard even lower for infill areas. If they've already got a street that's built and functioning, they, in many cases, would be allowed to keep that street as is, or maybe with some minor improvements, but not what our ordinance today says, if you're redeveloping in an area like that, you have to build the street to our full standard, as if you were building a brand new street. This would allow that lesser standard in infill areas.
Right. It's the direction we need to be taking. Thank you, John. Do I have further questions or comments from Guy? Would you like to come forward?
I just wanted to note that the report, the housing study report, is available to everyone via our website at economicdevelopmentsanangelo.com. There's no spaces in that, so economicdevelopment.com. And if you look under the community profile, the 2019 housing study is under that. It also scrolls on the front page of that website, so thank you.
I want to commend the Community Development Strategies Organization for this report. It exceeded my expectations in terms of what this report could tell us about our community. You sometimes think you know, and then you get this statistical analysis of everything from rental to income levels to age groups to deficiencies. It has been an incredible, eye-opening, incredible strategy put together for us, and we need to embrace it. We spent the money to get it. Let's embrace it and make sure we utilize this information to help make quality of life happen for everyone in this community. We had a meeting at the military yesterday. You know, some of our military are bunking 3 people to a room because there's lack of housing, affordable housing. They're our single largest employer. We want to have mission growth, but we don't have housing growth, and it's hard to have mission growth without housing growth. And so we need to address these issues at all levels. Housing is key right now. Okay, I'm done.
Ditto, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so with that being said, let's move on to item B, which is an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of a conditional use CU 19-09 to allow for household living, including multifamily living, in the general commercial CG and office commercial CO zoning districts being 20.192 acres located within the 1800 block of West Loop 306 near North Bentwood Drive. John?
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. As you may know, the zoning ordinance allows for what's called a conditional use approval. Those are for types of land uses that are considered generally appropriate for an area, but only with an individualized determination. So in other words, we've made the determination that it shouldn't be allowed by right, but that we should look at each case individually. And so that's what the case is here. Under our zoning ordinance, those are approvable by the Planning Commission. They do not normally come to City Council, although there is an appeal process. And so that's what's come to you today. The Planning Commission did approve this particular conditional use, and I'll get into the details in just a second, but some of the surrounding property, or one of the surrounding property owners has appealed that approval to you all. And so in a minute, I'll talk about what your options are in terms of upholding the Planning Commission's decision or reversing it and denying it, or you also have the option to modify it. The location here is on the Loop 306 frontage road. This is in the north side of Bentwood. Bentwood Drive is right here, and then here's Pine Valley Street. And so it's the area there in red. You may notice, I got a question on this. There are some addresses in here. Originally, this Castle Pines Drive was planned to continue all the way through to this future road here. And so we got so far as to even issuing addresses for those properties. However, with the change in development to the proposal here, that has basically gone away. It's just our GIS still reflects those addresses that were originally assigned.
So those houses aren't built?
Correct. And they're not even, the lots aren't even platted. So those should come off soon. So as I mentioned, the Planning Commission's decision may be appealed to City Council either by the applicant or by citizens interested. The Planning Commission meeting met on June 17th, and we did receive the appeal letter within 30 days. And so here is what you're able to do. You can modify the decision or reject it, or just uphold the decision of the Planning Commission. But as the ordinance says, you can only do that if it's not supported, if their decision's not supported by substantial competent evidence, or if you believe the planning decision was contrary to either the comprehensive plan or the zoning ordinance. So you do have some leeway, but there is an element of you finding that for whatever reason you don't believe their decision was in the best interest of the community. You could either, again, you could reverse their decision and deny the approval, or you could modify it perhaps with additional conditions if that was your choice. This is the area. You can see the future land use plan for the area is basically commercial on the frontage road with residential behind it. And so part of the question here is what is the appropriate transition between those two? You can see the existing zoning is general commercial, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but one of the factors to be considered is what could happen on this property if you did not approve the request that's before you today. A few pictures of the area. It's lots of trees there, so it's hard to see the site from these pictures. There is some additional commercial development nearby, as you saw on those maps, but then to the south there is the Bentwood neighborhood with homes that would be close to immediately behind this, and I'll talk about that. There is a separation distance between the backs of the existing homes and this proposed development. In fact, since I have the map here, let me go back and mention that right now. As you can see, this area is zoned general commercial, and then there's another commercial zoning on that strip, but there is this area right in here that you can see a strip of about 60 feet of single-family zoning. That has not been requested to be changed, and so these homes here will back up to a minimum 60-foot strip that can't be developed with apartments, even if you approve this proposal. This is the plat of the area, just to give a little bit closer view of what I was talking about earlier. This Castle Pines Street has been replatted to basically make it a cul-de-sac rather than continuing the street through, making this one developable tract that could be for the proposed apartments that you're considering now, or could also be developed under existing zoning as commercial. This is a concept plan. Again, you're not approving this. This isn't something that you don't want to focus on the specifics of it, but more in the sense of this is one layout of what could happen on the property. This is the loop here. This is Wolf Creek Drive. It's a little misleading here. That would be a temporary cul-de-sac. Wolf Creek Drive is a planned collector street that will continue.
But it's not signed right now, so you wouldn't know where Wolf Creek Street is.
It's actually not a street yet, but
right.
It is on some platted lots. There's a section of Bentwood further down that would extend that drive, and it would continue on further south. I think you'll see that's one of the issues here, and I don't know that it's on this map. You can see Pine Valley also is a collector street that will continue over to this Wolf Creek Drive. And so part of the concern is if this becomes apartments, that traffic could come through the neighborhood once those streets connect at whatever point in the future those do. Here's some photos that the developer has provided of an example project in another community that is kind of a model for what they want to do here. So I'll probably let them describe it in more detail, but their goal is a high-end.
That's not a
attractive,
traditional-looking apartment complex by any means.
Correct, and as I'll note in a second, based on the comments at the Planning Commission, one of the conditions that they added was to limit to single-story development. So you're not talking about 2, 3-story apartments like your typical apartment complex. These will all be one-story buildings, as you see here. Just another couple of pictures of some of the development that this would be modeled on.
The structure there, is that more of a duplex style? How many units are in that?
I would defer to the applicant there on what exactly these pictures are showing, but and what their plan is.
You're calling it an apartment complex, not a duplex complex.
Right. But
So
it could be anything from single unit up to multiple units. As you know, we had one a proposal in the Bluffs not too long ago, and that proposal was for technically apartments, but each unit was a standalone. So it was almost like single-family homes individually separated, but because they're all together on one lot, we would still consider them apartments. And that would be the same here.
Not much unlike what we've got right across the street here.
Say that again?
I said this concept would not be too much different than what we've got right across the street here.
The new development
The new
behind Rio
development
Concho
over here.
Manor.
They're all lower homes. They're not high-rise apartments.
Correct. And although I think this may be even a lower density than that is even. And here's an example. You can see that there are multiple units in this one, but still that same architectural style and nice quality development. So in your staff report, we identified some of the rationale for approval. I will note that some of you have asked about, if you read through our staff recommendation, we raised some concerns in, as you see here, concerns with the proximity to the single-family residential. And so as with many of these types of projects, there are pros and cons to approving it. But on balance, and with the conditions that were recommended, we feel comfortable recommending this project. And again, that's not to say that there aren't concerns, but we think this particular development has addressed, to the extent they can, those concerns with the proximity to the residential.
Of course, the issue brought forward earlier was flooding, and so can you talk about that issue? Are there retention ponds or detention, whichever they're called, that would be required to, go ahead.
The short answer is yes. At this point, because we don't have an actual site plan and we don't have the detailed plans, that's actually looked at later in the process. But our ordinances do require a drainage plan and will require any drainage to be mitigated somehow. It could be detention ponds, it could be other means, but that is definitely part of our development review process. And basically the short answer to what they have to do is limit drainage after development to no greater than it was before development.
And then the issue of traffic.
In fact, traffic is one of the things that I know from the Planning Commission discussion is a big concern here. Traffic either coming through the neighborhood, from the apartments out through the neighborhood. Although the flip side is if this became commercial, which is zoned for, we would expect even more traffic both ways through the neighborhood, either neighborhood residents going there to shop for whatever is there, or the reverse trips. And so we didn't do, I know the applicant is going to present you some numbers on traffic counts and generations, that sort of thing. We didn't do a formal study, but just in looking at it briefly, apartment developments generate much less traffic than commercial developments by
point.
multiples,
Yeah.
not just a little more, it's significantly different. And so that's also something to keep in mind. We did send out our notifications originally to this proposal to everyone within 200 feet. You can see we did get 3 in opposition, but we did also, in addition to that, get a petition with 88 signatures, mostly from folks within the Bentwood area, although we didn't ask for addresses, so some of them could have been outside the area as well. But there is, as that indicates, there is some opposition, significant opposition to this request. This is an area map that just helps show as we talk about traffic. We can talk about some of the directions traffic might move. We believe that most of this traffic will use the frontage road, but there could be some increase in traffic through the neighborhood. But for the most part, if you're heading north into town and you're at an apartment complex here, the quickest way to get most places would be to come out on the frontage road, come around Foster, and then up and out. And as you can see, I talked about this is that future Wolf Creek Drive, the extension of Pine Valley, and then ultimately long-term, as this undeveloped area here develops, there'll be an extension of a road that'll get you all the way to Foster Road, which will help with interconnectivity, both for emergency vehicles, but also for getting people in the neighborhood in and out as well.
John, would you go back to that map, please? So you said some of the residents in Bentwood had expressed concern about traffic. So what are we talking about? What would be the traffic flow if it was to go through Bentwood?
I think the idea is if that's the apartment complex, some of the traffic is going to go down Wolf Creek, over Pine Valley, and then possibly Valley View out to Knickerbocker. That's probably the most likely. Maybe some down Bentwood here. But I think that's the predominant concern that I've heard, at least, is that Pine Valley to Valley View to get out to Knickerbocker.
Tommy, because this is in your district, I'd like for you to add comment and input, please.
Before he gets to that, if
Yeah.
I could, I have
Sure.
one more slide
Sorry.
here on the
Sorry.
conditions that were recommended by the Planning Commission. It requires a site plan. That's a basic requirement. It would require a 6-foot opaque, which means you can't see through it, privacy fence. So between the single-family homes and the apartments, they would have to have a 6-foot fence, 25-foot setback for any building. Now, remember that that's, there's already that 60-foot buffer between the homes and the apartments anyway, and so there's not going to be an apartment anywhere near any of the backs of those homes. Open space of at least 10 feet. Again, that's the rear of their property, so that increases that separation from the homes to the apartments. All lighting should be shielded so that parking lot lights, for example, aren't shining in the backyards of those adjacent homes. They need to preserve at least 25% of the existing trees on the site, or replace any. If they can't meet that with the existing trees, they can replace with an equivalent number of trees. And then, as I mentioned, the proposed buildings can only be 1 story. So that is the list of the conditions that were approved by the Planning Commission.
Thank you, John.
If you would pull that there, thank you. Go back to number 4 there, second. Yes. The at least 10 feet adjacent to any properties. No. So are you saying then the 60 feet with this in there is 70 feet, or is it only 60?
I think it would be, it would be from their, that would be part of the 60 feet, because their property line goes all the way to.
So the 10
backs
feet
of
is
those
included
homes.
in the 60?
Right.
Okay.
Hillary Bucher, Planning Manager. To note, there are some properties that do not have the buffer, some residential properties. So these conditions also address the properties that are directly adjacent to the commercial, which allows the 10-foot buffer would mean no parking lot, no drive aisles, at least 10 foot before any development, and then 25 feet back for your buildings.
So 35 feet.
Well, yeah, the 10 could be included in the 25, so 25 for the buildings and at least 10 with green space.
I'm glad she mentioned that. As an example, portions over here do not have, it's these homes that have that 60-foot buffer, but there is portions of the property that the property comes immediately to the backs of those homes, and so that's
Those
where
homes aren't built yet. I thought you said.
That's, well, the ones immediately adjacent I don't think are. That's correct. But that's where the 10-foot and the 25-foot buffers in those conditions come into play.
Okay. Well, I've got more, we'll hear from the applicant, and then from the opponents as well, I'm assuming, because I want to hear more about the calculation on the traffic. John, can you even speculate, because you brought up the point, something besides, if it were not the apartments and it were just to remain the commercial general classification there, can you speculate on how many businesses could potentially go there on that 20 acre tract?
It's hard to speculate, but
what does the zoning allow for?
The zoning allows for general commercial, which could be retail, which could be certain automotive related uses, Dollar General, those sorts of, any sort of retail or commercial development. The tract is larger than you might expect looking at it. It's about the same size as, I think it's Southwest Plaza there at Knickerbocker and the Loop. Those are almost exactly the same size. So if you picture that Southwest Plaza there, restaurants, multiple restaurants, lots of retail, all of those sorts of uses.
Truck repair, so you could have a lot of 18-wheelers and a truck repair.
I think truck repair would fall into heavy commercial, so that wouldn't be allowed. And some of that, at this location, you probably wouldn't get a big shopping center like that, although it's possible. But you could definitely get like a neighborhood serving convenience store, which would definitely pull traffic, into and out of the neighborhood. That sort of neighborhood serving commercial could definitely see something like a retail shopping center, a smaller scale retail shopping center, almost all of those commercial uses would generate more traffic than an apartment.
Tommy, go ahead.
Public safety. We haven't talked about public safety. Is the chief? There's the chief at the back there. I do have a concern from a public safety standpoint. We have a railroad track that bisects the frontage road right there by McCoy's. That railroad track continues where it then bisects Knickerbocker Road. I have sat there personally when the train is probably long enough to block both the frontage road and Knickerbocker Road. So, Chief, I guess I got a couple of questions. Is that something you can deal with, or is that going to create some issues for your ambulance and your fire people?
We can deal with it. Of course, Engine 8 out at the airport could come in from the normal direction that it would come in. The other vehicles would end up coming down around and possibly having to come through like Country Club Road and down that area through Los Lomas to get to that. So, or depending where the train was at and where it was on that railroad track, we could come to Foster and possibly go back up against traffic on the one-way road. We would look at it and we would figure something out fairly quickly, but if we have to go around, we will be delayed, or the second and third incoming vehicles will be delayed.
I want to go back to what you just said. The laws are such that your folks can go the wrong way on a one-way street?
We've done that in emergency situations. We've had cardiacs like at the wharf where we went right back up the deal so we could get to community quickly. Shaved off about 2 minutes on a return trip for somebody, depending on the situation. If we got a structure fire, we're going to come down there, because if we delay 3, 4, 5 minutes, that building is liable to be on the ground.
Well, there is that turnaround underneath the bridge that avoids the railroad tracks that's on the northeast side of it. The railroad tracks go to the left of that, so if they come down Foster, around DPS and the frontage road going the right way.
You may be right, Lane.
No, it is true.
Yeah.
You may be right. Well,
in emergency situations, we will take those kind of actions, deem in that.
So does that, and this is not something to discuss, but it raises the question for me, with the development that is occurring out in that area, and I'm not talking about these apartments at all, but I'm talking about that area, we probably need to be looking for another location for. I know we've got a new one there on Chadburn, but still, that may be an area that. Anyway, that's
with
another day,
development
another
towards
day.
that area of town. The next one will probably, my guess, looking at the spacing between them, will be somewhere down around Templin and Country Club Road is where a station would need to be set.
Okay, that's another day, another discussion. So I got some questions, I guess, for the applicant. I don't know if that's Mr. Collins or Kevin. I'm gonna say, why don't you say what you want to say, and then I have some questions for you.
So would you like me to go ahead and just do my whole part?
That'd be fine with me.
Okay.
So.
I'm Kevin Collins. I'm the managing partner of Bentwood Country Club Estates. And the first thing I'd like to say is that as a community, one of the most important things for us is to find the best uses for our properties, because we do have spent a lot of time, money, and effort building a nice master planned community in the Bentwood area, and have invested many dollars in that. And so wanted to make sure the council knows that part of the reason that we've done this and used the opportunity for multifamily is it is actually a very, very good use of the property. In fact, when we got our unanimous approval at Planning Commission, Mr. Stribling said, I cannot think of a better use of this property from the development perspective or the residents' perspective because of what it could be. So the thought process is that based on information I've gotten as far as the concerns, there's really three main concerns that I wanted to cover, and then I can answer any other question. The first concern is what we're talking about versus whether, potential commercial applications versus apartment use applications are what could happen. To answer your question on a 20-acre tract, that's what this is. We did just a quick little analysis that we put, I believe, in your packet that talks about if you just had 1-acre tracts, that would be 20 businesses. There wouldn't be any conditional use permit on that conditions. They could just go there. They wouldn't have to come get a conditional use permit to do these commercial applications. So all of those businesses Mr. James was talking about are options for that commercial piece of property without even coming back or asking for a conditional use. When you look at us doing the apartment complex, we went into great detail making sure that they are single story. I mean, they're not going to be looking down at anybody's backyard. And you've seen the pictures of these units. They're beautiful. They have high quality construction, and based upon those units, we feel like that the use of that 20 acres for that is much better than the use for a commercial application. I know that it's possible, like Mr. James said, that you wouldn't have a Southwest Plaza there. But if it was there, you could have literally 50 or 60 businesses on a 20-acre tract. You don't have to do it just on 1-acre tract. So it could be a large amount of commercial activity. So when you look at the specs of having, 267 or so units of luxury apartments versus a possible 50 other commercial uses, we as the developers felt like this is an absolute the best possible use that we could. The second element that comes in is said, okay, well, now you're going to have this, are you going to have a lot of extra traffic? Well, the city of San Angelo uses a basic factor that is in your packet as to how many cars that we figure for based upon apartment complexes. And it's broken down based on the amount of bedrooms. I mean, if you've got a one-bedroom apartment, they factor in 1.5 cars. So there are factors all the way out as to how many cars would be in a potential unit. So if we were 100% occupied based upon just kind of the outlay that Tigris has put together, that's about 505 cars is what would actually be coming and going every day from that apartment complex. Conversely, if you had a commercial application, there are over 1,480 residences in Bentwood now that exist. So those residents, and if you live in Bentwood, the one thing you want is to be able to drive your golf cart, which we've had many conversations about, but also you want to live in your community. You want to leave your community to go. So if there was a commercial application, if there was, even if it was a Dollar General and you just wanted to go over, you're going to come through Bentwood and go back home through Bentwood because nobody wants to get on Knickerbocker Road and have to take the extra time to get there. It is actually about 4,000 extra feet to go through Bentwood to hit Knickerbocker than it would be to hit the loop and come back around and to go anywhere north. And that would be ASU, the military, all of the businesses up there on Sherwood Way. So anybody that's going north of Bentwood, it's 4,000 extra feet and 4 traffic lights to stop at, as opposed to just hitting the loop and going. So I think it's important to recognize that if you've got 1,480 homes in Bentwood, that's about 3,000 cars. That's a conservative estimate, okay? Because there's not very many homes in Bentwood that aren't at least 3 bedrooms. Most of them, a lot of them are 4 bedrooms. So if you use the factors based on car, it's going to be 3,000 cars minimum. So those cars could potentially just go back and forth through Bentwood to go to those commercial applications. Conversely, your apartment complex people, most of them are going to hit the loop. Okay, the only places they're going to want to go is maybe to the neighborhood Walmart and maybe over to the Stripes. But at the same time, would you look at 505 cars coming back and forth through that area, or the potential of 3,000 just from Bentwood? That doesn't have any applications for the rest of the city coming to use these commercial applications. A couple other things we've done is we are going to completely fence it. There are at least 4 potential options to enter this commercial track if you do it as a commercial option. We, with our apartment, Tigris is going to do the apartments, we've actually cut off 2 of those potentials. So when you look at, I don't know how to use this thing, but when you look at Shadow Creek, there's actually, we're putting a cul-de-sac there. You can't enter those apartments off of Shadow Creek. You can only enter these apartments off of Loop 306. And then when Wolf Creek Drive is there, which is not there yet, and it'll be there in the next couple of 3 years, I would say, there are 2 potential options there. Okay, so it's totally enclosed at this point. There is no application to be able to enter through Bentwood now. But once the master thoroughfare plan comes through, then Wolf Creek will intersect. But it doesn't do that at this point. So there's 4 potential options if you just do straight commercial coming through Bentwood, but we've reduced those to basically 2 on this conditional use option. And so you look at, okay, you got apartments versus commercial, then you've got, okay, traffic. Well, when you got 505 potential cars versus as many as, if you got a Walmart there, it could be 10,000 cars if you had a super Walmart there. So it's exponentially less traffic when you have 505. The other options that are there is the potential property value losses of having an apartment complex next to your home versus, you know, anything else. Well, it's generally known that commercial applications impact residential applications more than multifamily does. And in your packet, I did give you an example. We do have an apartment complex that's been built recently in Bentwood, and it's interesting. The same people that are building this built the Cameron Place apartments, which were started in 2014, actually kind of opened sometime in 2015, and hit the tax rolls in 2016. So we took 8 homes that actually border the Cameron Place apartments and put in your packet the appraisal district property taxes. None of those homes have lost value. In fact, some of them have increased in value as much as $45,000 between 2016 and 2019. So we don't feel that there's going to be a property value impact on this. Specifically, Cameron Place apartments enter and exit through Bentwood. So and they are 2-story as well. So as far as a property value example, we don't believe it's going to negatively impact. In fact, based upon our relationship with Tigris up to this point, they are first class, high quality. In 2016, their Cameron Place apartments won the Apartment Complex of the Year for City of San Angelo. These are extremely well put together providers, and one of the reasons we went with them is because we know what they're going to do. And that brings me to the benefits of a conditional use permit. What it's important to understand is that we feel that we're partnering with these people because they're putting in Class A, low, single-story, quality construction home, apartment living that really will benefit the area to a certain extent. But the most important thing is, with a conditional use permit, that's the only thing he can do. Okay, he can't come back in 20 days and say, you know what I'm going to do? I think I'm just going to sell this to Walmart. And those of you that have been on the council for a long time or been around, that very thing happened on Knickerbocker Road in Valley View when they were going to put high-end condos where the neighborhood Walmart sits today. And so when there came a problem with it, the developer stepped back, Walmart came in. Next thing you need to, you've got a Walmart as opposed to these high-end commercial apartments. One thing, too, that I want you to understand is they do have a 24/7 on-call courtesy officer. They have on-site management. These people have been doing this for a long time and at a very high-quality rate. So we feel like that when you look at all options that are available to this commercial track, I've been involved with Bentwood for 32 years. It's always been zone commercial. It's been zone commercial way before I was involved with Bentwood. It is a commercial piece of property that will be used in commercial uses at some point if we don't do this. Also, there was one other, not to get too crazy, but there was one person that said, well, let's make this all residential. Well, if you take that 20-acre tract and I develop it at 3.5 homes per acre like I can and put all 3 4-bedroom homes in there like are in Bentwood, that's actually more cars than this multifamily. That would be about 700 cars would be coming back and forth. So your residential application, even though that would never happen because that's just not the way that you make things happen to the loop, or you just wouldn't have that happen. But residential has more cars. Commercial has tons more cars. And so when you look at the overall project, we feel like it's the best use of the property. And most importantly, our city staff has approved it. Our planning commission gave us a unanimous approval. And we do understand that these are our residents, these are our members, these are people I work with every single day, and they're my friends, a lot of them, and they're not real happy with me right now, and I get that. But at the same time, I think if they take a deep breath and see what we're actually doing, we have taken a lot of time and effort to make this the best possible use of this property. So we are asking that you uphold the Planning Commission's decision to allow for this apartment complex. And if there's nothing else I can say, I just watched you guys get told there's a 96% occupancy rate in apartments. These are nice apartments for your military people that are living 3 to a room. These are extremely nice apartments. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions, and I know that Mitch Elliott from Tigris is here as well to confirm. I know one of the questions was, is that what it's going to look like? And I think Mitch can kind of address that, if you would.
Go ahead and make an announcement of your full name.
I'm with Tigers.
Thank you.
And yes, we would almost have identical quality, materials, and workmanship than these pictures. So almost an identical community.
All right, Tommy, you said you had questions for Kevin. And
Since you said, and I'm not sure if it's the schematic, but where the buildings are, that was just, I guess, an example of what could go on the property. But at some point, that's going to have to be finalized, because I've got some thoughts. I would like Mr. Velasquez, he's the one that filed the appeal. I think, to be fair to Mr. Velasquez, we need to also hear his concerns too. But Mitch, I think I have some more questions for you, because since that's not final yet, to maybe talk a little bit more about that.
It is what we would have liked to have done. I'm hearing this 60-foot requirement, and so I think that's going to require us to eliminate a couple of buildings along that neighborhood. And so it will, the number of units will be reduced, but it will be very similar to what we saw there as far as the layout.
Okay, and I want to follow up with that in just a minute.
Say the number of units again.
It was going to be 300, and I'm guessing it's going to be about 270.
So that may address one of my thoughts and concerns, but I'll circle back to that. But I think, again, to be fair, Mr. Velasquez, since he's the appellant, needs to be able to state his concerns as well. I've had cordial conversations with both of these gentlemen. In fact, they probably got sick and tired of me this weekend because we talked quite a bit. So, Mr. Velasquez, why don't you address the council with your concerns?
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Sergio Velasquez. So I just wanted to say 88 out of the 90 members or neighbors I've had conversations with in Bentwood, and many more in the surrounding areas through this process, are against having more apartments built in Bentwood for the 2 reasons I stated in the appeal letter. First, we believe this causes much more traffic in our streets versus the 2 current commercial zones and RS1 zone there now. I've given examples of speculated about businesses that could be there, where patrons would just get off the loop, do their business, and get back onto the loop. Most of those prospective patrons would not drive around Wolf Creek to Pine Valley to North Bentwood to Valley View to get back to Knickerbocker. Valley View is not a collector, yet it is getting more and more traffic, and speeding is a major concern there and will only be getting worse. Depending on the businesses that could be there, there may be no added impact from Bentwood residents using Pine Valley to get to the prospective businesses. These streets cannot realistically support traffic from 307 units, I guess maybe now it might be lower, plus visitors, plus employees, without proper traffic management and control provisioning, which I have not been able to see yet. I wasn't privy to some of this documentation. We're also worried about property values. When the apartment owners don't rent their 1 bedrooms for $2,000 a month, they will begin to lower prices, and these will no longer be luxury apartments. People have invested their life savings in homes in this neighborhood. There's a chance these apartments will negatively impact home values. When we moved here, we were told the RS1 behind our home, and I live on Pine Valley, which is lot 20 there. My backyard fence will directly be seeing the buildings. And so up to now, I've not been given official submitted plans on where the pools will be, the barbecue areas will be, or what the hours will be. We just don't know. At this point, it seems though our concerns in Bentwood seem to be minimized to the project. It'd be appreciated to at least give us a meeting with the developer, I guess this may be it, to go over the finer details of the project and our ideas. Ideas, for example, bordering the property with tall trees, big bushes like oleanders for noise mitigation from the tenants, their visitors, employees, landscapers, etc. Then subsequent landscaping separation between the trees and any structures. All in all, from Pine Valley, it'd be great to have 150 feet between our backyard fence and any structure. Also, to not have parking, for example, where vehicles' exhaust would be pointed at us on Pine Valley or Castle Pines to avoid vehicle exhaust. Moreover, placing pools and or barbecue areas closer to the loop side of the complex versus near Pine Valley or Castle Pines would be something to look at. Another note, we've been dealing with construction in this area for over 18 months, and in so, speeding and reckless driving, mostly from contractors, many driving trailers and driving pretty crazy through the streets, 7 days a week and all hours of the day. Can we limit construction hours and days per week, loud spinning concrete trucks and framing beginning at 6 a.m. and going until 8:30 p.m. almost every day seems too much. And lastly, could we confirm drainage will be taken care of correctly? Pine Valley becomes a 6-inch deep flowing river when it rains hard, and concerns have been brought up that improper construction from this complex could cause drainage issues. Just want to have that on the record. It's been brought up a few times, but yeah.
I'll confirm with Mr. Velasquez. I have been out there when we had some heavy rains. The water on Pine Valley is an issue.
The people on Valley View have speculated that the Cameron Place apartment complex has not helped the Valley View drainage either. So that's basically the gist.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
So, Mitch, a couple of questions for you. If you're going to, because those two buildings it showed there on the back, I'm assuming those are the two buildings that you're thinking about.
John, would you come forward and move this thing around a bit? I think they're wanting to refer to another slide that showed where the plats could be but aren't platted. Yeah.
The actual buildings, actually, if you can pull that up.
Well, go to that rendering, the buildings right now of the buildings on the property. Yeah, that one right there. Yeah, so Mitch, I'm assuming.
It would be, you're correct, that those two bottom ones, D, I think they're both Ds, and building C and G there would have to be.
John, can you come
My
up here?
eyesight is great, but I can't find B and C.
Okay, there they are.
Touch the screen with your
Oh,
finger.
okay, all right.
Okay, so you're talking about you would remove those two.
I would remove those two on the very bottom and then shrink those other two.
Shrink those others and maybe move them up to even with those others. Okay.
Parallel with the others, that's correct.
So what would you speculate some additional green space would be gained there by the elimination of those two buildings? Would that be an additional?
I would speculate that we would go above 60 feet to around 80 feet.
So that would be 80 in addition to the 60 that's already there?
No, 80.
Inclusive.
Total of 80?
Yeah.
Okay. And then trees were mentioned as a part of that. Is that something you'd be willing to?
You and I, Tom, when we spoke a couple times this weekend, and we would be willing to put up some larger trees along that fence, along that perimeter. And we would be willing to put up a 7-foot fence versus a 6-foot that the commission asked for.
Okay. And if we were to say in the it would be an additional condition, but that the aesthetics would be consistent in terms of construction and landscaping. The aesthetics for the project would be consistent with the images presented. Would that?
I have no problem with that.
Because those are nice looking.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, they are. Mayor, if I am ready to make a motion. If
You do so.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. And so let me ask, I guess, Teresa, John, if we want to uphold the Planning Commission, do we also include denying the appeal and upholding the Planning Commission decision? Is that it?
I think so, yeah. You would uphold the Planning Commission's decision, but if your intent is to modify those conditions, then I would say to uphold their decision, but with modifications to the.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we uphold the Planning Commission decision, and with these modifications, the ones that currently exist, that John presented, but then change the 6-foot opaque privacy fence to 7. Then if we need to put this in there, John, so be it. Those 2 buildings on the back would not be built, but that would be, I'll say, the additional green space there with trees at 35, 40 feet apart along that line there. And then the aesthetics be consistent. With the aesthetics in my mind would include the construction of those buildings and the landscaping with the images that we have been shown. And then as part of with the removing those other 2 buildings, John, shortening those 2 that are pointed north and south there that have the 3rd red line. Yes.
Basically, no buildings beyond a
Right,
line
correct.
roughly in that location.
Correct. I would make that as a motion, Mayor.
There's
I'll
a
second that,
motion, a
Tommy.
second by Lane. We're going to open up the conversation for public comment, so anyone who would like to come forward, please do.
Morning. My name's Dave Durker.
Would you say your name again, please?
Dave Durker.
Dave Durker.
I live on North Bentwood. I don't have any problem with apartments. In fact, that looks like a good use of that parcel. But I think the traffic numbers that we're hearing are deeply flawed. Just looking around my neighborhood and my next door and across the street neighbors, I have a 4-bedroom house with 2 cars. Neighbor across the street, 6-bedroom house with 2 cars. Next door, I've got 5 bedrooms with 3 cars. Next to that, I got 4 bedrooms with 2 cars. In other words, these numbers about traffic from the neighborhood are deeply flawed. The statement that it's 4,000 feet farther to go through Bentwood than to go out on the frontage road and around Foster Road ignores the fact that the majority of that traffic is going to be going to the Walmart neighborhood store. And that will take traffic down Pine Valley to North Bentwood to Valley View, or possibly to North Bentwood to Bentwood to go to the airport. Now, just because of the single-family construction that we're seeing in the north part of Bentwood right now, traffic has substantially increased over the last year on North Bentwood. Now, the speeds, that's a different issue, but just the number of vehicles on that road are concerning. We've got golf carts, we've got people walking, we've got kids driving golf carts, which shouldn't be happening, but it is. So we're creating a situation that we're probably going to regret at some point in the future. The business about telling me that commercial could be worse, well, some commercial might be, but some commercial wouldn't be. So if we had low traffic commercial in that area, it might be less traffic than an apartment, and it certainly would be less traffic through the Bentwood neighborhood. So I'd like to see some traffic studies done before we move forward with this. It's also misleading.
You're limited to 3 minutes, so if you'll just wrap up your comments,
Okay.
that would be
It's
great.
also misleading to say that Camera Apartments go into Bentwood. There is a little road that goes into Valley View, but the majority of the traffic goes on Westway, which is a real wide street. Valley View is real wide at that point going out to North Bentwood. So we're getting a lot of kind of misleading information, and the traffic from that many apartments is going to ruin the neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Further public comment?
Good morning, everyone, again. Anna Bartosh, and I just wanted to reiterate and maybe add a little bit to the flooding issue. Pine Valley, 6 inches. The last rain down Foster Road, and I see no retention pond in this mock-up here. Our down Foster Road, there's a fellow that has put up a fence for his goats. He's doing goats, and that fence is at least 4.5 feet high. You could go down there and see debris on top of the fence, and it actually blew down the water blew down his gate. So they were there trying to repair the gate to keep the goats in. So in addition to fish in the backyard, now his goats are going to be out because that water is at least 4.5 feet high when it floods and it goes across Foster Road. And I'm not privy to this information, but hearsay I have heard that Stripes did buy that corner lot between Foster and the Loop. And so they're not building there. I know the water now, it's a swamp. And so drainage is definitely an issue. They probably didn't do any kind of studies if they did buy that. But that's what I have to say. Drainage, flooding is definitely a problem. This will certainly enhance it.
Thank you, Anna. Further public comment?
Good morning. I'm Dave Antle. How are you?
Good.
I've lived on Bentwood since '09, North Bentwood. And when I first moved there, the street didn't even go all the way through until they built the 3 commercial buildings that are down there now, the health spa, and of course it was Principal LED for a while, which they've moved and left that building empty. But you had to open the road because of the fire trucks. And I understand that, 911. That was the first change to the traffic pattern there. The reason we bought that house was because you could freely walk the neighborhood, visit with your neighbors in the driveway, and not worry about kids being run over by cars. Since they've opened the road, traffic has improved. Growth of the neighborhood has improved it even more. And what these gentlemen have said is absolutely true. The traffic count in there is obscene. The speeding is obscene. The police don't work it, and I'm not blaming them for any of this. They have a full-time job. I'm concerned, just like they are, about the traffic that will get to the point where you can no longer walk your dog in the neighborhood without worry of cars. Absolutely true, again, what they've said. When Walmart came in, it caused a huge amount of people to sort of sneak around back and forth to get through there. If I lived in those apartments, I'd probably use those back roads to get back and forth too. That is a major concern when you have a significant amount of cars in a neighborhood. It's no longer a neighborhood. And that's my concern with it. I much prefer what happened with the veterinarian clinic that opened on the corner, because people are there when they're open, they get off the loop, they use the vet, then they get back on the loop. I think if we went a commercial route on those lots versus this apartment complex, we would keep the traffic at a workable, manageable level in the neighborhood, and people would get off the loop, do their business, and get off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further public comment? With no further public comment, we will go ahead and take a vote. All in favor of Tommy's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. I'm going to ask that we take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back. Item C, first reading and public hearing considering an amendment to the city's land development and subdivision ordinance, Chapter 1, general provisions, Chapter 3, definitions, Chapter 5, procedural requirements for subdivisions, Chapter 6, guarantee of performance, Chapter 9, subdivision design policies, and Chapter 11, water facilities. And we have John James on for the presentation.
Thank you. Again, John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. This is an item that we've been working on a little over a year. We wanted to do some cleanup, as we've sort of talked about in some previous items. We're going through our ordinances, trying to clean up development processes, In some cases, changing the ordinance to do it the way we've always done it, but it was never that way in the ordinance. And in this case, you'll see that a number of the things, most of the things we're proposing for these changes to the subdivision ordinance are intended to make the development process better for the development community.
And cheaper?
Yes, in some cases, this would, especially to the extent that it would make their process quicker. And for developers, time is money.
Time is money.
Exactly. We did take this back to the Planning Commission back in July of last year. Since then, before that, it went to the Development Task Force. This has gone to the Development Task Force 3 times, to the Planning Commission 4 times. So we've gone back and forth on a lot of these issues, but what comes to you today was unanimously recommended by the Planning Commission with no opposition from the development community. So the issues that we had throughout the process, I think we've gotten to a point where everybody's on the same page. And so I'm going to briefly go through the changes that we're proposing. In the general provision, this is about what requires a subdivision plat. Right now, the ordinance says it's dividing a land into 2 or more parts. Historically, for decades, the city has required a plat when you're taking 2 pieces of land and combining them, but that's not technically in the ordinance. So that's a cleanup to actually add that provision in the ordinance. Again, it's really not a change to the way we've been doing things, but there was some question of what the actual language of the ordinance says.
So we are breaking the ordinance?
Well, I shouldn't say the
Because
ordinance.
we don't allow that, right, for anybody else, and we were doing that?
I would say, I would phrase it as there's ambiguity in the ordinance on how to interpret it. We've interpreted it one way historically for years and years. There is another way to read that ordinance, and so we just wanted to make that language clear in the ordinance.
Crystal clear.
Crystal clear.
Right now, there is, this item is talking about an exemption for adjacent platted lots. So if I own 2 adjacent lots and want to build 1 home across the lots, this would, and in this case, it expands it to 3, you wouldn't have to replat those lots and combine them through the subdivision replatting process. If you are the same owner and own those 3 adjacent lots or 2 adjacent lots, you could just build across the lines without special approval.
John, couldn't that come back to bite you? Say you own 2 lots and you sort of build across the lots, and then later you sell one of the lots, or what you think is one of the lots, but part of the home is on one of the lots. What happens?
We do, for that reason, we do require that the structure actually straddle the property line. Otherwise, we would have to enforce the setbacks. So for example, you can't build a home any closer than, it depends on the district, but say 5 feet from the property line. So you either have to build the home to comply with the setbacks on the individual lot, or you have to completely straddle the lot so it takes up both lots, with the idea being, in most cases, you know, the lender or the title company or the realtor or somebody would catch the fact if you try to sell only one of those 2 lots, somebody would recognize that there's a half of a home on one of those lots. There's an exemption right now for what triggers platting. If you're only expanding a building by less than 50%, you don't have to plat. The problem we have with this is that something like a Walmart that may be 100,000 square feet, they could add 30, 40, 45,000 square feet and not have to replat or plat if they hadn't done that. So this reduces it to 25% threshold, but then it also creates an exception for smaller scale developments too. So it helps us catch those big developments like a Walmart, but it doesn't penalize maybe a smaller scale building
So smaller
or a home.
scale, still, tell me if you're a smaller scale what it does for you, because it says 25% additional floor area.
You could expand the 5,000 square feet within a 12-month period without having to plat. So that's what gets the small scale. If you're a small building, you could expand more without having to plat, but it doesn't exempt the larger building like a Walmart from expanding. It reduces that trigger for them to the 25%. It also completely exempts any home that's 1,000 square feet or less, because we've had some small homes in town. They just want to add a small addition, but because their house is so small, that addition's over 50% expansion, it's triggering them into the plating process, so this creates that exemption
Good.
for them. It also clarifies the definition of subdivision. In the ordinance right now, we define subdivision and in the definitions, and then we define subdivision in the ordinance itself. And so this removes that duplication and also makes sure it's consistent with the definition in state law. This is another example of a benefit. Right now, administrative plats expire after 6 months, so we're proposing to increase that to 12 months. Right now, final plats and replats, they technically expire in 18 months, but that can be extended another 18 months. We want to just make that straight 3 years, so there's not this extension process that people have to go through. It just reduces the complexity.
Based off of the backlog of framers, tile people, or whatever else, one might say that the expires increase to 12 months ought to go to 18 months.
Well, again, this all happens before they're ready to build.
I know that's the issue.
This is the time from when the plat is approved until they have to go file it at the county. And so that's when they're building the streets and things, but they can't get a building permit or
Okay.
even start building until after it's filed at the county.
Okay, that clarifies it.
Preliminary plat currently has no expiration. There isn't a repeal process. We've cleaned that up and removed the repeal process and just said that preliminary plats expire after 5 years. I think I have a slide here from our peer cities. Abilene's expires in 2 years, Amarillo 2 years, Big Spring and Lubbock expire in 1 year, Midland is 6 months, and then 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, and 2 years. And so we originally suggested 3 years because that was the longest of our peer cities. In the back and forth with the development community, we settled on 5 years being an appropriate length of time for those preliminary plats to expire. But I want to make sure I clarify that this most recent progress means if you do a large area, say Bentwood, for example, they've preliminary platted a whole large area. Each time they do a final plat, doing the next phase of development, that will push out this 5 years. So every time they make progress on a development, it continues to push that expiration. So no developer will have a preliminary plat expire while they're continuing to develop.
So the question mark, and this probably doesn't happen at this time frame, but you know, one of the big issues that has come up before is, and unfortunately relative to Bentwood, is that the drainage issues were not addressed in the original platting, and now there's drainage issues because of that platting. And it might be, applies to many, many areas of town. So I don't want to say Bentwood, it's just, it could apply to. So what happens in this case? How do we ensure that the issues relative to drainage are better addressed than they were perhaps in the original platting?
Well, a couple of answers. One is there's a difference between the preliminary plat and a final plat. So even an area like Bentwood that has had a preliminary plat, when they come in with the final plat, they still have to present the drainage information. But this actually has a benefit for just the scenario you're talking about, because if somebody had a preliminary plat done in the 1950s and they wanted to final plat today, some of the rules that we have in place now wouldn't apply to them, because under state law, we have to apply the rules in place at the time they did got their original approval.
Today, the issue about Foster Road came up. So the comment was that they have to create no additional flooding issue, must maintain as it was before the project was developed.
Right.
But one would say, but don't you really want to make sure that it improves and not just equals?
That's a policy question for you all. What's required by state law is that developers can't make the problem worse, but they're not obligated to fix a pre-existing problem. That's kind of the philosophy we look at that at. And that's basically how our stormwater ordinances are written, is I mean, it's more complicated, and the engineers can give you more detail. But basically, it says you can't make it worse. But like I said, they don't have to make existing problems. They don't have to fix those.
Daniel, you want to make
I was
a
going to say,
comment?
and if they did, of course, if they're having to address issues from the past, their costs would be higher as well. So
Oh,
you'd
sure.
be hearing from those developers and say, why should we try to fix the issues of the past? All we're trying to do is develop this area, of course.
And I'm not suggesting we do, but that came up as a comment
Sure.
and a question during today's meeting, so I just think this is appropriate time to bring it forward again and answer that more explicitly.
And sort of related to this, also in Bentwood's case, their preliminary plans have a large regional detention facility that is being constructed now that has always been planned. It's just now they've gotten development to that point. So in that case, it actually will help those downstream areas, but it has already, been
Okay,
been
so I'm
planned.
sorry Anna's not still here because I think she'd love
She's
to.
here.
Oh, Anna, did you hear that? Okay, there you are.
So anyway, that is being addressed specifically in Bentwood, but that's part of the reason these expirations help, is that we're not bound to the old rules, because if somebody came forward and said, hey, I have this preliminary plat that was submitted in 1950, we would have to let them develop under the 1950 stormwater rules, which I don't think anybody would want to see us have to do. We've also created, under our ordinance, there's guarantees, and the way it works is you can do a plat, you can get a plat approved, then you have to construct the roads, install water lines, et cetera. Instead of doing that, you can put up a financial guarantee, which right now is a bond or a letter of credit from a bank or even just straight cash. What this would do is allow an opportunity for a deferral of some of those things. So for example, in a commercial development, at the time they plat, they may not know what the development is exactly going to look like, so therefore it's hard to do a drainage plan for that area. This doesn't alleviate the requirement to do a drainage plan, but it can allow it to be deferred to, say, the building permit process when they're submitting site plans. Right now, our ordinance doesn't have that deferral procedure, and so this allows a developer to push something down the road. Another example is with residential development. In certain areas where improvements have to be made to the roads or sidewalks or whatever, they can do that this would allow them to do that when the home's being built, not have to do it back when the area is platted. Same with the drainage study. I actually already mentioned this. This would allow the drainage study to be deferred to a later point. It does have to be approved by the city engineer, but that is an option that doesn't now exist under our ordinance. This is another similar situation where water service connections, we heard from some commercial developers that they're fine with running the water lines in front of the business, but until you know what the commercial on the site's going to look like, you don't know where those individual service lines need to go, and so they wanted the option to be able to defer that to the building permit process. That's kind of the overview of the changes. Staff does recommend approval, and the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval. As I said, this has gone to the Development Task Force a number of times, and I think the proposal here is something that everybody is comfortable with moving forward.
Including the Development Task Force.
Correct.
Okay, so do I have further questions or comments? Lane, Lucy, Billy, Tommy?
Move to
Tom?
approval.
Okay, I have a motion for approval.
Second.
A second by Tommy. And I have an opportunity for public comment at this point. With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 None opposed. Motion passes 6-0.
Mayor, I do want to thank John for looking for different ways to really ease up on some of the regulations we do have, the procedures that we have, which will assist us in the future when we start talking about development. So a lot of times we hear about, the one item that there was a complaint, like the 5-year deal, but really what he's trying to do is make it easier for development in the future. So we do appreciate that. Thank you, John.
And thank you for taking into consideration the Development Task Force, because they're the feet on the ground, the money on the ground, making development happen. So it's important that they sign off and support. All right, item D, consider ratifying COSA DC's resolution authorizing the use of sales and use tax funds in an amount not to exceed $59,000 to provide an economic development incentive to West Texas Steel and Supply, or WTS. And today we have our Shannon Scott from Business Retention Expansion Coordinator making the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Shannon Scott, Business Retention and Expansion Coordinator for the city. As Mayor Gunter stated, this particular agenda item is in regards to ratifying a resolution that the COSA DC Board approved a couple of weeks ago at their monthly board meeting for a BREP project for West Texas Steel. So we'll just kind of give a little background information on what the company does. So they are a steel manufacturer and fabricator of steel products, metal building materials, sheet metal, angle iron, pipe, square tubing, fencing, and accessories. So some of their customers include the oil field industry, pipeline, construction, as well as farm and ranch operations. So they are planning on expanding their current facility with a new 36,000 square foot building. And their current facility is located at 6617 South US 77, which is in Councilman Hebert's district. So with the construction of their new 36,000 square foot building, they're anticipating expending up to $750,000 in capital investment. They currently have 20 employees, and they anticipate hiring up to 3 additional employees within the next 3 years. And those additional employees, as well as their current, have an average salary of $41,600. So again, like we do with all of our projects, we run them through our economic impact analysis tool to generate return on investment. And in this particular case, we're able to grant them a one-time $50,000 grant once their $750,000 in capital investment has been expended. They must retain their current 20 employees. And if they do create the 3 additional employees, we're able to pay them $3,000 per full-time equivalent. So overall, the total breakdown of incentives with the capital investment grant as well as the FTE job creation would be $59,000.
Those 3-time full employees, the $3,000, is there a time frame that they must stay employed?
3 years, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Oh, 3, sorry.
So again, when we do run our economic impact analysis, these are the returns that we're generating and that we're looking for when we're able to expend the funds to these companies. So in this particular case, the economic impact for West Texas Steel would be $1.1 million in annual economic output, as well as $400,000 in gross annual product annually, and then a payback period of 6.2 years. So we try to generate that return within less than 10 years, but closer to 5 years. So this is right around the payback period that we're looking for this particular project. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Do I have questions from council? Harry?
Just making sure that the public knows this money is not paid up front. It has to be paid when they meet these particular goals that we've laid out. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So in this particular case, we'll just talk about the capital investment incentive, for example. So they have to show us renderings once that capital investment is made, and that comes in the form of paid receipts, credit card, things like that, paid checks. So invoices will not constitute payment. We actually have to have proof of payment of those expenditures before we grant that money. And the same thing with the job creation. So once they create that job, we ask for their quarterly reports to verify that that person has been employed for an entire year before we actually incentivize them that $3,000.
Move to approve.
A motion by Harry, second by Billy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There are none opposed. Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Item E, consider awarding FC-01-19 Fort Concho roof replacement to Harrison Roofing Incorporated in the amount of $953,791.50 and authorizing the city manager to execute any related documents. Bob, you're on.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. It's our pleasure to report to you that you gave us a task back on June 18 to explore the costs and come back with an estimate for the repair and re-roofing of 16 fort buildings. You gave us a basic budget to deal with, understanding that the estimates were 2 years old, and I'm pleased to report that the low bid is only 3% above the estimates of 2 years ago. Harrison of San Angelo was the low bid, base bid of $867,000 with contingency. The other bidder out of town was much higher, and we feel that this is a good bid, and it takes a major, major issue off of our mutual hands. And I stand ready with any information or questions you may have.
Billy, Lane, Lucy, Harry, Tommy.
Move we approve.
Second by Lane. All in public comment, please. With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Get those roofs done before the next rainstorm.
I and my roofs, thank you.
Boom. And here we are praying for rain.
Boy, council just stirs up controversy everywhere we turn. All right, we are going to have a budget presentation on health insurance discussion and an update, and we have from Holmes Murphy Senior Client Service Consultant Julie Rickman. Welcome, Julie, and welcome, Brian.
I was just going to go off script just a little bit. Good
No.
morning, Mayor, Council. How are you? I just wanted to take a little opportunity to reintroduce Veronica Sanchez, our HR manager. So she's coming back to the city, and we're excited about that, especially during this process.
Welcome home.
As you know, healthcare costs are a big part of any discussion for any employer, especially
With
on
that
the
said,
side.
let's just say this presentation will mean no higher premiums.
You're still in the negotiation process, but we've
Not open.
we have reason to be very excited. But with that, I'll turn it over to Julie.
See, we set the stage correctly.
I know, I'm a little nervous now about talking after you gave
You-
that
that's
expectation.
what we wanted you to be.
Again, my name is Julie Rickman. I'm with Holmes Murphy. I'm the senior consultant for the city of San Angelo. Had the privilege of working with you all for the last 10 years now, so I've been a while with you all. So I think there's a presentation, and I don't know if it's...
Someone help her with the button, the push button.
Down button? All right, perfect. So just going to take a few moments of time today to talk about your current budget and the market trends for the city right now and what you're looking at. And then talk a little bit about the marketing process that we're in the middle of right now and then our next steps through that. So I like bringing up this, and this shows what your medical and pharmacy financials are through July of this year. And if you look at the green line that kind of, I guess it's greenish, yellowish line, that's where your actual costs are. So you see these ebbs and flows. That's when you have high dollar claimants that come on, things like that. But if you look at that purple line, that's your budget. And right now we are sitting at, as far as July, about $149,000 under our medical budget that we have.
No one can get sick from now until
From now to
September
the end of
30th,
the- yeah,
so
absolutely.
don't think about it.
Do we need a motion on that, or is it just? And then I wanted to point out, I broke this down by both your pharmacy and your medical claims. And so your medical claims, the current market trend, meaning what the market is usually seeing when it comes to medical, is 7.7%. That means that as the cost of services for medical are going up 7.7% right now, and we take a study of the major insurance companies, other consultants, and see what they're using, and then we have a blended rate that we use for that. And right now, your trends are at 0.3% when we're looking at your medical. So your medical is running well below trend, but your line is pretty steady. So when we're looking at that green line is your actual claims dollars, and the orange line is the curve of where your trend is at. Well, you see there's no curve. You're basically running flat for that. And that's really a decrease of severity of large claims that you've had, but just keep that in mind.
We should all be eating healthy, not these things that we're eating today.
I was
just
gonna tell you.
saying.
Some Nutter Butters and like cheese crackers up there. Pharmacy claims, current pharmacy trend is running at 10.3%, and your pharmacy is running at 12.2%. That's actually not a surprise. There's an increased cost of medications right now.
We're now going to allow Canada to ship across the
everything
United
down.
States, so that should bring that down.
And then increased use of specialty medications. Anytime you see a commercial on TV TV about a medication that can cure everything and has a really long name, that's usually really expensive. There's actually a few medications out there that are incredibly expensive. There's, for an example, a medication that can cure childhood blindness for specific types of blindness. It's $1 million an eye. So there's medications out there that are incredibly expensive. Fortunately, we haven't seen any of those with the city, but you can see the trend of our medications going up. We have better outcomes and results from the medications that are out there, but they're more costly. So just keep that in mind when we're going forward. Any questions on how your plan is currently running?
Wait, Harry, would you like to
Absolutely.
make a comment?
And it's just a general comment. There is some proposed legislation at the national level that would keep these pharmaceutical companies from advertising. We are the only nation in the world that allows pharmaceutical companies to spend millions of dollars on advertising. And a lot of businesses know that when somebody sees that advertisement and it's a cure-all for whatever they've got, they run to the doctor and said, I need this. And in some cases, those particular doctors will prescribe it. So it drives that cost up. I think there's an opportunity that sometime in a relatively short future to take that out of the picture.
Yeah, and just, one of the things that we do as your consultant is we evaluate your pharmacy, your prescription drug list every year with the insurer that we work with and determine whether or not there's things that need to go up or down tiers, if there's things we can tighten up, if there's additional rebates that we can collect, things like that, that help out quite a bit with that without impacting your members at the time of service. So I understand exactly what you're saying. We're constantly monitoring your pharmacy because obviously when we look at your trend, that's what's driving any kind of increases that you see is the pharmacy itself right now.
And I assume that and I'm not sure how quickly it's going to happen, but obviously they're going to start allowing Canadian firms to ship into the United States legally.
Yeah, and that may or may not impact your plan depending on how insurance companies will view those. So it could run through as a claim through your insurance company, but if it doesn't, that's really just member impact versus the city of San Angelo impact immediately. Obviously, if you have people that are getting pharmacy outside of their current plan, then it saves the city money as well, but we'll have to take a look and see how that impacted and gets you long term.
Okay.
And then for marketing this year, I know there's a lot of stuff on here. Every 5 years, we look to market, and sometimes more frequently than that, most of your lines of coverage when it comes to employee benefits. So we marketed everything this year. So when that list looks pretty exhaustive, it definitely is. We've gone through everything from ACA reporting to your dental to your EAP programs, medical pharmacy, and all of that as well. And I like this picture so much because this is what HR and purchasing took this picture. Those are all the responses that were sitting on the table in purchasing when we received them back. So we had quite a bit of market that came back and wanted to bid on the city of San Angelo.
I think that's the most we've ever seen, actually. That's
Yeah,
pretty impressive.
and in fact, we're looking at that. It was 81 individual lines of coverage that we went through and evaluated. We had a committee meeting with your insurance advisory committee on July 25th, and we certainly appreciate the time that they put into that because talking about benefits for a few hours is a lot.
Yeah.
And then because of that result, we did go out to the market and request best and final results. One of the things with the advisory committee is we let them know in the beginning the information that we talk about at that meeting is confidential up until the point of where we've decided to made final decisions. That gives us negotiation power with whatever vendors we're going back to best and final on. So while I can't give you any information about what's going on right now and what we've negotiated or what we're negotiating currently, I'll let you know that we've had, as Brian alluded, some really optimistic bids that are out there, very competitive. So we're very excited about being able to come back and present to you all the competitive nature of those. So right now, we're just awaiting best and final offers for the lines of coverage that we sent out. I'll be back here on the 20th to present what our recommendations are to you all. But right now, we're, again, looking cautiously optimistic at everything in the future for us for our benefits as well as our budget for our plans.
We're not taking a vote or a motion on this item, but I wonder, does council, anyone have further questions that they would like to ask of Julie?
How often do you look at, let's just say, things like employees being medication compliant, participating in any wellness initiatives that may be offered? Is that something that you look at and it is a possible item for bid, or something that, talk about that just briefly?
Yeah, in fact, wellness happened to be part of the bidding process that we went through, saying, I mean, if we have the health of your members increase, or if people are aware of the disease states they currently have, we have better incomes or better outcomes and lower cost of service. So, it's obviously a push that we have for that. Currently, we do quarterly meetings where we review what your current spend is. If people are compliant, it lets us know how many people are getting their preventive screenings done, lets us know how many people are participating in our wellness program. One of the things that we like seeing is your current wellness program has quite a bit of participation, and I don't have the numbers with me right now, but we do see when they do their reporting that we're showing that people aren't, they're not getting worse in their disease states. They're either staying the same or improving the quality. So we know we've had reduction in blood pressure, the high blood pressure. We've had reduction in obesity. We've had a few reductions in that too, based on the programs that we have in place currently. And then when we received our market response back, I can let you know that the vendors on the medical side that responded also included wellness and disease management type programs that will help people. So let's say Julie Rickman went in, got diagnosed with high blood sugar, but never picked up a prescription for any kind of medication. There's outreach for a lot of those that will come out and say, hey Julie, here's a letter. Or we'll give you a call and say, we noticed you haven't received these medications. What can we do to help you? So definitely something we want to progress on. I think it's incredibly important, but it's part of the RFP process and something we are evaluating as well.
Good. Yeah, and while it doesn't have the overnight immediate impact, it does start to bend the cost curve, which may be a result of what we are seeing now because of the amount of time that it has been in place. So I would just encourage you to keep those up, Brian.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. When we have employers that have wellness programs that aren't just the basics and have people that outreach and go above and beyond, go to different departments, we see results like that more often. We're not seeing the high dollar claims being for chronic conditions. So we're seeing your high dollar claims being more for a back surgery or maybe a premature baby or something like that versus a heart attack or a stroke or complications of diabetes. And we definitely see that in your trend as well, where those preventable things aren't as large dollar spends.
Oh, yeah, a robust program is no doubt going to yield longer term results than results today. So
yeah,
good.
We can't control trend in itself, but we definitely can help people make better choices when it comes to their own health.
Thank you very much. All right, we will move on to item G, which is the discussion and direction regarding ballot language for the November 2019 special election. Daniel, you're on.
Yes, ma'am. This is really just for direction. Quick discussion on this one item because this is something that will be coming up here soon. We have talked about a special election here in November to address the sewer project at Lake Nasworthy, but also the quality of life projects that have been listed that we've received also from the Homeowners Association, which includes the rebuild and improve of existing boat ramps, remove or replace otherwise rebuild a wooden fishing pier near the Nature Center, and shoreline erosion protection and restoration. So there's some certain things that have been brought to us as far as the quality of life type projects. And what I just wanted to make sure with City Council is that we're still on the same page moving forward, that we're really addressing the Lake Nasworthy sewer project, but also these other projects that I just mentioned, the quality of life projects. And I wanted to get your direction as far as including all this in one single ballot or separating it. And my recommendation would be actually put it in one single ballot. But I just want to kind of get y'all's input on it as we move forward and we present it next time. But again, this is an item that we had discussed, and I want to make sure that we're still on the same page.
I strongly support the ballot initiative. I strongly support the recommendation of up to $6 million for the improvement at Lake Nasworthy. I strongly support that the balance of the fund as of the date of the election be used towards the sewer project. And I feel that this is one of the most important things that we can do, not only for the ability to make Lake Nasworthy a much better recreational facility to allow for the appropriate growth and development out there, as well as the development and growth that we must make happen at our airport, and also to help protect some of the businesses and residents that have had to live with some sewer smells, et cetera, because of the backup of sewer. So it's a big quality of life improvement for many people, whether they live right around Lake Nasworthy or not. We know that we as a city need to attack a lot of infrastructure issues. Sewer is certainly an infrastructure issue that must be attacked and protected. We can't allow this existing situation with the sewer to continue to hamper our growth and development of many areas that are deserving of development, as well as quality of life and recreation that the lake provides. So those are my inputs. Any other comments?
I'm on the same page, Daniel.
Very good.
Yep.
Excellent. That
Move
really,
forward.
yeah, that's all we
I think it's what we need to do. It's a recommendation I made 2 years ago. So let's move forward with it.
2 years ago, we didn't know $32 million existed.
Well, I didn't know it was going to cost.
Just saying something.
What I did make the recommendation is that we needed help out there with the sewer issue, and the Lake Nasworthy Fund was a part of that solution.
All right, Dan, do you have the
Wonderful.
direction
Yes,
you need?
ma'am. We're all on the same page. We'll move forward.
Okay. Item H, consider record vote to propose a property tax rate and discussion regarding the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. And I'm assured that you're going to say to us that we are going to keep the tax rate consistent with where we've been.
Yes, ma'am.
Or lower.
Or lower. So at this point in our budget process, we are in August. Of course, we'll have 2 workshops this month as well as 2 public hearings. We have 4 meetings this month that we'll address budget topics in. And then in September, we'll have our public hearings and adopt our budget ordinance. So here we're ready to consider the record vote on the proposed property tax rate. And this vote it's a best practice for this vote to occur if we expect this year's property tax rate to yield more revenue than last year's property tax rate. We are proposing to keep the rate the same, of course, but we will expect to yield a little bit more revenue, more than likely just with new properties being added to the roll. So we wanted to bring this to you just as a best practice in the event that we do have additional revenues from that source. So again, just proposing to keep the tax rate stable at the 0.776 per $100 valuation.
Obviously, we each need to make a statement
On the
about it.
record.
So I'm going to start off with, I propose that we keep the current tax rate at 0.7760 valuation per 100 valuation, and hope that down the road, next year, the year after, we can reduce it.
I just have a question
Yes,
before I
ma'am.
make my declaration, because I agree 100%. But what would we need to do if we wanted to look at shaving off that 6 and making it 0.77?
We would have to find somewhere to reduce our expenditure budget.
I bet you could do that.
Money.
Well, it's not so much about reducing our expenditure budget as much as it is the needs that still have to be addressed. We've talked a lot about the infrastructure needs that we have in our community. We get a lot of calls and complaints about the potholes, repairs that need to be made, and we really would like to continue with the 776 to at least continue addressing those needs. As the values go up, especially as new properties are added to the tax roll, we definitely, again, even with those new values added to the tax roll, we have a more responsibility to maintain even more. So I just want to make sure that we continue on that route. Sometimes, I don't want to weaken our ability to address those infrastructure needs.
And as you see there, the debt service amount of 0.0936 per $100 valuation, that for the most part at this point in time is going directly to fund our street initiative, where we're trying to issue debt every other year for that 10-year period. So.
Billy, I support your comment and conceptually, and I think we need to be looking at it. I don't think this might be the year to do it, but I certainly would love to have that conversation further debated next year.
Well, and hopefully when we're going through our budget conversations, we can say what we could look at.
Correct.
Next year to possibly be able
Perfect
to do
time
that.
to do it. So thank you for that comment.
Just to put in perspective, what if you shaved off that 6? Do you have a value in millions? What that would be?
How many millions of dollars will it impact? I think Kimberly can tell us.
Kimberly's trying very quickly to figure that number out, but I believe last year the value of 1 cent was about $450,000. So,
While she's trying to do that, Mayor,
6% of
I'd
that.
like to
Yes,
make a
go
comment.
ahead, Harry.
300,000.
I just want to remind citizens that are watching that our sales tax does not cover the public safety budgets, fire and police. That's got to be supplemented by sales tax.
You said property tax, actually.
It's property tax, does it, not sales tax?
You said sales tax, there's property tax.
Property
Yeah,
tax, I'm sorry.
Sure.
It has to be
And
supplemented
this is
by
property
sales tax.
tax.
Yep. So what we got to do is we got to make sure that we've got what we need to do here. And I would recommend that we stay with the .776. And I know that citizens want to change, shave, especially when the county and the school district are proposing different rates for this next year. I would also say that I think, and it may be beyond my time on this council, but as we increase the opportunity in this city to have more businesses come, and that's been the mayor's proposal for the last 2+ years, I think then you've got that opportunity. If you take a look at our sister cities, they all have greater commercial and higher sales tax than we do, and part of that is that we've got to continue to grow that in order to give the property tax people, property owners, some relief.
And to that conversation, we certainly, as we go through the budget, can take a look at the $450,000 to $600,000 that would need to find savings on for the 2020-2021 budget, and we can use that as an overall goal if that helps make a decision. Lane, I think we answered your question. Lucy?
I don't have any questions.
Tom?
Did you want
Oh,
us
go
to go
ahead.
ahead and support
You
this
have to-
right now?
yes.
We have to do it individually.
We have to do it individually,
I've
Tina.
done mine individually.
I support the tax rate of .7760.
Lane?
Tax rate of .776.
Lucy?
I support the tax rate of .776.
Harry?
I support the tax rate at .776.
I support the tax rate of .776 per 100 evaluation.
With the goal of reducing that in the 2021 budget. Thank you very much.
Do you
With
need
that-
a vote? Do you need
No,
a
we-
vote, or is that expression enough?
I think
That's
that's what
good
we
enough
had
for
to
the
do
record
was
vote.
individual.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we are going to move into the closed session. The executive session under the provision of Government Code Title V, Open Government Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government, Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D, exceptions to requirement that meetings be open under the following sections. A, Section 551.072, to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if deliberation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governmental body in negotiations with a third person regarding Friedrich Heinemann S. 327 and Windstone Park Addition. Item B, Section 551.071(1)A, consult with attorney when the governmental body seeks the advice of its attorney about pending or contemplated litigation regarding CLEAT or TMPA. And C, Section 551.074A1, to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee regarding the annual evaluation of the city manager. And with that, we will have a closed session. We will be gone for an hour and a half. And so that means that we will be back at what time? I'm sorry.
It's now 11:43, so we're looking at
1 o'clock. We're calling the meeting back to order on August the 6th, following executive session with no announcements needing to be discussed based off the closed session. And so we will move into item B, consideration of approving various board nominations. The Water Advisory Board, Judge Stephen Floyd, TGC Commissioner, Chuck Brown, UCRA Director of Operations, and Bruce Partain, Chamber of Commerce employee. And the Zoning Board of Adjustment, Stephanie Hambry, Mayor Pro Tem Alternate 1, to first full term ending January 2021. Do I have a motion to accept those
Move to approve.
nominations?
So
Elaine approves, second by Harry. Any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 6-0. We will now open up the meeting to announcements and consideration of future agenda items. What I just want to add is that next Tuesday at 8:30, we will do our first budget session here in this room. It will be open to the public, as you all are aware. So if you want to add input to the budget session, please join us next Tuesday. And do I have any other announcements? Oh, Billy, you want to talk about your town hall meeting Thursday night?
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly would. There will be a community meeting on Thursday, August the 8th, starting at 6:30 at TLCA Academy on Melrose Street. And the purpose of that is to share information with the public regarding the new Honda dealership that is being built. It's just east of the new HEB on the Houston Hart Frontage Road. So all are welcome. We will meet in the gym. It's labeled on the building, the west entrance next to Stafford Street. So everyone is welcome to attend. I think you will be there, Mayor.
I will be there.
And the planning department will be there. And so we're looking at having a good, informative meeting. And the citizens are really interested in what is going to take place and exactly how the dealership is going to be positioned and whether or not big transport trucks will be parked in front of their house. So we hope to address all of their issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, do I have a motion for adjournment?
I got a couple of things.
Oh, sorry, Tommy.
No, that's fine. For a future agenda at the appropriate time, I'd like to see a 3% pay increase for the employees. And then my second thing is I have a question for Julia. Julia, would it be possible if we could receive our agenda packet no later than 12 noon on the Thursday preceding our council meeting? I know that may.
On Thursday?
On Thursday, preceding council meeting. You know, so we're not, yeah. Rather than on Friday, get it on by 12 noon on Thursday.
The only issue I can think of with that is if items are added last minute, based on the meetings that Daniel has throughout the week.
Work toward that, Tommy?
It's with this issue, because this will happen from time to time with council. There's going to be things like this weekend. I needed some information, and by the time I was able to get everything formulated, I didn't, everybody was gone home, rightly so. So, I realize that may be somewhat of an imposition, but, anyway.
You can have it ready partially online, can't you? Or do you have to submit it all?
No, it would all be published as one.
Well, it even gives the public more time
Right.
as well. So
It's tough getting it done when they get it done now. So if you have a special item, you might ask for the background information on it ahead of time versus the whole packet.
We'll definitely strive for that, but it really just depends what we get last minute. But we can work together if there's something that you need in the future, for sure.
Thank you.
Just to set the stage, I'm going to support no more than a 2% increase for employees on the budget, so it sets the stage for knowing what we've got ahead of us in terms of a debate. So,
yeah, I move we adjourn.
okay.
All in favor? Aye.
We're done. All in favor? We're done.